The President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. The Chairman of the State Administrative Council, Prime Minister of the Provisional Government and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Myanmar, Minh, Aung, Hlaing. Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan. The Prime Minister of Mongolia, Luvsannamsrain Oyun-Erdene. The Chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of China, Zhanshu. And the moderator of the plenary session, Ilya Doronov. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to welcome you all here. It's great that bad weather and typhoon was not in our way, although the skies are not clear all around, but nonetheless it is wonderful that we are all gathered here. While I was preparing to moderate this session, I obviously watched the previous plenary sessions, and I've realized one peculiarity that I find really surprising. Just think, back in 2019, the pre-COVID year, there were fewer participants of the plenary session than we have now. Right now on the stage, we have 5 participants, and 3 more will be with us through a video address. And just as a small side note, those people who are seated on the stage right now and people sending their video address represent the interest of more than 3 billion people. But nonetheless, we all understand very well that the world has changed, and the world of year 2022 is very different from the world we had back in 2021. We used to talk about pandemic and coronavirus before. Now we are all talking about military action in Ukraine. We are talking about global economic crisis that is coming. And it seems that in many countries that have never been used to double-digit inflation rate are seeing it now. There is a shift in governments. Some countries are preparing for looming energy crisis. Others are preparing for economic meltdown. But the world has split for Russia for friendly and unfriendly states. And it turns out that friendly countries are much more numerous and prevailing in the East for us. And therefore, the role of the Far East is becoming bigger and bigger, and probably it is time to revise it. And Far East is seen as a gateway to Russia for many Asian countries. And today, we will discuss whether this region is ready for rapid change that is coming ahead, as we call this plenary session on the pathway to a multipolar world. So once again, a very warm welcome to everyone seated in the room. A special welcome to everyone seated on the stage. Saibaino, Min Balaga, Bartis, Ni Hao, and good afternoon. President Putin, the floor is yours.
Distinguished guests, Excellency Mr. Minh Aung Hlaing, Excellency Mr. Pashinyan, Excellency Mr. Oyun-Erdene, Excellency Mr. Zhanshu, ladies, gentlemen, I welcome all the participants and guests of the Eastern Economic Forum. Russia, and Vladivostok in particular, is once again hosting the leading business people, experts, politicians, public figures, and officials from dozens of countries from across the world. We also have video addresses from India's Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mr. Ismail Sabri, Yaakob, and Prime Minister of Vietnam, Mr. Pham. I thank them for the time they've found to participate in this plenary session. As is tradition, the Eastern Economic Forum gives a platform to a discussion about projects and initiatives that are of paramount importance for the development of Russia's Far Eastern regions, for reinforcing cooperative and productive ties between Russia and the Asia-Pacific countries, just as with our long-standing traditional partners and those countries that are only now starting to foster a dialogue with Russia across a wide spectrum of avenues and business projects. And of course, this meeting in Vladivostok is yet another good opportunity to have a look at the current state of affairs in the global economy, to have an exchange of opinions, to talk about the trends and major risks. last year, the Eastern Economic Forum took place after a pause we had to take due to the coronavirus pandemic. Back then, most experts concurred that the business environment was starting to recover across the world, and they thought that once the COVID restrictions were gone, it would very soon get back to normal. But the pandemic has been replaced by new challenges of a global nature, carrying a threat to the whole world. I'm talking about the sanctions rush in the West and the West's blatant aggressive attempts to obtrude their modus vivendi on other countries, to take away their sovereignty, to submit them to their will. There's nothing new about that. That is the policy pursued by the collective West over the recent dozens of years. But these processes were precipitated by the US's slipping dominance in global economy and the global politics, as well as the obdurate reluctance, if not inability, of the Western elites to see and recognize the objective facts. As I said on multiple occasions, the whole system of international relations has seen irreversible tectonic shifts. We see a significant growth of the role of dynamic, promising countries and regions of the world, first and foremost the Asia-Pacific. The Asia-Pacific countries have turned into new centers of economic and technological development. They've become a magnet for human resources, capitals, and production capacities. Despite that, the Western countries are trying to maintain the old world order, which only benefited them. They want to make everyone live by the so-called rules that the West comes up with on its own. And it is also very often in breach of these very rules. And they are also trying to change these rules to suit their purposes based on the current circumstances. And when other countries refuse to follow this diktat and arbitrary rule, the Western elites, to put it bluntly, simply lose it. They take nearsighted, foolhardy decisions from the point of view of world affairs and world politics and the world economy. And these decisions run counter to the interests of nations and peoples, and in particular, the interests of the people of these very Western countries. And the level of industrial development Europe has attained, the quality of life, social and economic stability, all of that is being sort of burned to fuel the sanctions machine. It's been squandered at the behest of Washington in the name of the so-called Euro-Atlantic unity. But as a matter of fact, it's basically been offered as a sacrifice to maintain the US's dictatorial grip of the world affairs. Back in spring, many foreign corporations were racing to announce their pullout from Russia, thinking that it was our country that would stand to suffer the most out of that. But as we can see, the Europe itself shutting down production facilities and jobs. And one of the key reasons is the severance of business ties with Russia. The competitiveness of European enterprises is going down because the EU authorities are basically denying them access to affordable raw materials, energy, and markets. And it comes as no coincidence if, as an outcome, the niche the European businesses used to occupy on the continent and globally is going to be snatched by their American patrons. Because when pursuing their interests, they never restrain themselves under any circumstances when they pursue a goal they have in mind. Moreover, in their attempt to stay the course of history, the Western countries have undermined the key pillars of the world economic system built over centuries. We have seen the loss of trust in the dollar and the euro and the pound as the currencies in which you can carry out transactions, hold deposits or assets. And that is why, step by step, we are moving away from the use of these unreliable, compromised currencies. And incidentally, even the US's allies are decreasing the assets denominated in dollars steadily. That is what the statistics tells us. The volume of transactions in dollars and the assets, everything is being decreased. Yesterday, Gazprom and its Chinese counterparts decided to move towards settlements in ruble and renminbi, and the ratio 50-50 in the payment for gas. And these nearsighted actions by Western authorities has spurred on the global inflation, which is beating record highs in developed countries. Everyone knows that, but I'm going to reiterate that. In July, the U.S. inflation stood at 8.5%. In Russia, it's around 14%. I'm going to get back to that. But unlike Western countries, we have a downward trend in inflation rates, whereas in Western countries, the trend is upwards. And by the end of the year, our inflation rate will have been around 12%, according to our experts. And in the first quarter next year, we will hit our target 5, 6%. Some say maybe even 4%. We'll see. But the trend is positive. And we see what happens in other countries. In Germany, it's 7.9, and Belgium, 9.9. In Lithuania, it's more than 20%. In the Netherlands, 14%. In Latvia, more than 20%. And in Estonia, it's 25%. And the trend is upwards. And this rising prices in the global markets can turn into true tragedy for the poorest countries that are suffering from shortages of food, energy, and other essential goods. Let me cite some statistics that underline how dire the situation is. The UN reported 135 million people in the world in 2019 to suffer from shortages of food. Right now, this number has doubled. It stands now at 345 million people. That's terrible. Moreover, the poorest countries are simply losing access to grain, to foodstuffs, because Western countries are buying out, and this can result in rising prices. Let me cite some statistics. You know how much discussion there's been about the need to secure exports from Ukraine, the exports of grain, to support the poorest countries. And we couldn't but respond to that. Despite all the difficulties around Ukraine, we did everything in our power to make sure that the Ukrainian grain exports could happen. And I met with representatives of the African Union, with other leaders of African states. And I promised them that we would do everything in our power to secure their interests, to make sure that the Ukrainian grain could be exported. We did that together with Turkey. But what do we have as a result? Let me report to you. Excluding Turkey as the mediator country, almost all the grain exported from Ukraine is flowing not into the poorest countries, but into the European Union. Under the World Food Programme, under the aegis of the UN, that is meant for the needs of the poorest countries. Only 2 ships have been sent, just 2 out of 87. It was used to export 60,000 tons of food out of 2 million, but that amounts to just 3% that has gone into the developing countries. In the previous centuries, many European countries used to be colonial powers, and they continue to act as such. They are simply deceiving the developing countries. And I can say that if this approach continues, then the problem with the food is only going to exacerbate, to our greatest regret, which can turn into a never-before-seen humanitarian catastrophe. We should probably think about limiting the destinations for grain exports, and I'm going to discuss that with Mr. Erdogan, President of Turkey, because it was he and I who came up with this plan. we need to help the poorest countries first and foremost. This is not what is happening right now. And I can tell you that this situation is the outcome of reckless actions pursued by the elites of the US, UK, and EU, who are laboring under political delusions. And they think that the welfare of their citizens, and even let alone people outside the so-called golden billion, well, the interests of these people are simply being relegated to the background. And inexorably, Western countries are going to end up in economic and social crisis, which will have unpredictable circumstances, outcomes for the rest of the world. Colleagues, Russia is steadily overcoming economic, financial, and technological aggression of the West. I cannot call it anything else. We've stabilized our currency market, our financial market. The inflation rate is going down. We have record lows in employment rates, less than 4%. And right now, the estimates and the forecasts of economic dynamics by entrepreneurs and experts, they are far more optimistic than back in spring. I would like to say that on the whole, the economic situation has been stabilized. It's true that we see problems in certain sectors, in certain regions, in certain companies, especially if those were reliant on supplies from Europe or were exporting their products to their markets. We will continue to work with the business to take swift action to launch efficient, targeted mechanisms for support. And I would like to ask the Governmental Commission on the Sustainability of the Russian Economy to pay particular attention to this issue. We are doing that on a daily basis, but despite these stabilization efforts, we are fully cognizant of the risks, and we are trying to keep that in mind. Russia, as a sovereign nation, will always protect our national interests, pursuing an independent policy. We highly value these very same qualities in our partners, who for many years have been demonstrating their reliability and responsibility in the course of trade, investment, and other types of cooperation. First and foremost, I refer to our colleagues from the Asia-Pacific. The overwhelming majority of the Asia-Pacific countries reject the destructive rationale behind the sanctions, because the centerpiece of our business-like relations is the principle of mutual benefit and cooperation. We bring together the potentials of our economy for the sake of our citizens. And this is our competitive edge. It is the foundation of our vibrant, long-term sustainable development. And the growth rates here are ahead of the world average. You know that on a yearly basis, the Asian countries' GDP was growing at around 5%. The world rate was 3%. At the US, it was 2%, and at the EU, around 1%. And this trend is persisting. And inevitably, this is going to result in an increasing share of Asian countries' GDP and the world GDP. It's going to rise to 45% in 2027. It's important for us that the Russian Far East economy is also developing hand in hand with the economies of the Asia-Pacific. And we need to improve the standard conditions and raise the welfare. We have to create high-quality jobs and efficient production capacities. The Russian Far East has already tested unique tax, administrative, and customs preferences. We are pursuing historic projects in such sectors as gas-based chemistry production, shipbuilding, biotech, and clean energy. And over the last 7 years, the production capacity in the Far East has grown by 25% or so, which is ahead of the countrywide average. So the Russian Far East is steadily growing at a faster pace than the rest of the country. We are going to stimulate further the advanced development of the Russian Far East. Making use of advanced measures of government support, we will create the best competitive environment for business. Here, we are going to continue to fine-tune the mechanism of advanced development territories for modern projects run together with other countries. We will put in place a favorable business environment to attract the cutting-edge technologies to Russia and also to foster production of goods with a high added value. And the recent developments have shown how important it is to have access to raw materials. Without raw materials, it's impossible to create any production capacities or create any cooperative value chains. Russia is probably the only country in the world that is self-sufficient from the point of view of its natural resources. The Russian Far East has an important role to play: oil, natural gas, coal, metals, timber, marine resources. All of that comes from the Far East. It's a major supplier to the domestic market and abroad. We also plan to efficiently use and develop our natural resources based on the most rigorous environmental standards, and we will achieve a high level of deep conversion of these resources in our country. We need to reinforce the sovereignty of our country, ensure our industrial security, and raise the incomes of our citizens and the development of regions. We've already protected our raw commodities from unfriendly actions. Only companies working in the Russian jurisdiction can develop our natural resources. The Ministry of Natural Resources, working together with the Ministry of Trade and Industry, are working together with the business associations to determine our demands in strategic commodities, and this is the basis of an updated strategy for our mineral and commodity sources with a bigger time frame until 2050. We need to pay particular attention to geological survey and also processing of scarce goods such as titanium, manganese, lithium, and niobium that are used in metal production, medicine, chemical industry, microelectronics, aircraft building, and other sectors, in particular new technologies for the storage and transmission of energy. On a particular note, I would like to ask the government to have a look at the development of marine bioresources. We have a mechanism of investment quotas in place there. We need to achieve a well-balanced growth. We need to use our production capacities to the full and ensure a harmonious development of the regional infrastructure. I also would like to underline that the marine bioresources and the money we get from that, as a matter of priority, should be funneled into the development of rural infrastructure to support employment and raise incomes, and I would like to ask the government to take concrete steps to that end. Over the recent years, Russia has done a lot to develop transport infrastructure, railroads and automobile roads, seaports and pipelines. And these timely decisions have allowed our businesses, amid the current conditions, to swiftly rework the logistics, to redirect the cargo flows towards those countries that are still willing and who want to trade with our countries, who prefer civilized, predictable business relations. It's very telling that despite the attempted external pressure, the throughput of Russian seaports has barely decreased over the 7 months of this year. It's almost at the same level as it was a year ago, around 482 million tons. Last year it was 483 million tons, almost the same. And as far as the Far Eastern ports are concerned, they are going through a logistics boom. The transshipment volumes, the number of processed containers are so big that professionals have to work without breaks or holidays. Even though some want to isolate Russia, try as they might, it's impossible to achieve. And this is something we've been telling for quite some time now. Just look at the map. We use our natural competitive edge, and we will continue to boost our transport potential. We'll build a network of automobile and railroads. We will also build new access points to sea terminals. Their throughput capacity is going to rise as well. Our centerpiece is the eastern dimension of our infrastructure, and also the international north-south corridor and the ports of the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. It will provide Russian companies with new opportunities. They will get access to the markets of Iran, India, the Middle East, and Africa, and it'll facilitate supplies from these countries in return. And by 2030, the overall cargo carriage volume through these main lines can rise by 60%. These are realistic forecasts, and this will happen. To achieve that, the government has come up with concrete roadmaps. There are 3 avenues. I've already named them. It will allow us to work systemically, will integrate the routes, fine-tune the timing and the throughput capacity, resolve the bottlenecks, modernize border checkpoints, and the related infrastructure. Together with these plans on transport corridors, it's important to modernize the rolling stock and the traction vehicles. On the Russian railroads, we need to provide our shipyards with the high-quality orders. They have to build tankers, bulk carriers, container ships, in particular to continue to develop the Northern Sea Route, which is a powerful transport route of national and global significance. I'll underscore that it's navigable year-round. We have modern icebreakers, and we design them, we build them, and they make this possible. This year, we have seen the first container ship run between Murmansk and Kamchatka along the Northern Sea Route. It is yet another testimony of the reliability and the safety of this ship escort pattern. And it's not just about joining these 2 destinations together. We need to make sure that in each port along the route, it's possible to get technical maintenance, to process goods. The schedule should be regular and predictable, and in that case, all the points along the route and the Northern Sea Route will stand to benefit from this logistics corridor, and this is something we have to strive for. The government has adopted the plan for the development of the Northern Sea Route until 2035. We plan to allocate 1.8 trillion rubles from different sources to implement this plan. The throughput capacity and the cargo volume is projected to rise from 35 million right now to 220 million tons per year. And of course, we need to have supplies coming from the Far East and backwards, and that is why we need a reasonable competitive rate. And I would like to ask the government to work this through. On a particular note, aviation is of the utmost importance for the Russian Far East, and it's not just about flights from the European part of Russia. We also need to achieve connectivity in the Russian Far East between as many settlements and regions in the Russian Far East as possible. And that is why we've set up a unified Russian Far East air company. It services almost 390 destinations, and some tickets get government subsidies. In the next 3 years, the volume should rise, and the destinations should also become more numerous. And they are in high demand. And because of that, we need to increase the aircraft fleet. We need to equip it with modern aircraft, in particular small aircraft. The decision has already been made, and I would like the government to strictly stick to it. And of course, on a systemic basis, the Russian airlines have to be re-equipped and modernized. Aeroflot has already come up with the biggest order portfolio to the tune of around 500 long-haul aircraft produced in Russia. And incidentally, the agreement between the Unified Aircraft Corporation and Aeroflot has been signed in the sidelines of the Eastern Economic Forum to the tune of around 1 trillion, if my memory serves me correctly. This is a very strong incentive for the plans and for the design bureaus and for related sectors. In particular, electronics. We need to help develop medical aircraft to make sure that medical aid is accessible to those who live in the remote areas. And starting from next year, we will double federal funds allocated for these purposes. The number of flights is going to rise. Medical aid is going to be provided with a greater level of quality and faster. Distinguished friends, all the decisions in economy and the social sphere, all these mechanisms we implement in the Russian Far East pursue one and the same goal. We need to make this region attractive to live, to study, to work, for people to build new families here, to have more children. And that is why we need to also build a very comfortable environment for living here. And we need to develop cities and towns. And that is why at the last year's forum, I came up with the task to develop master plans for the biggest Russian Far Eastern cities, administrative centers with the population of more than 50,000 people, and also Tinda and several Baikals. The key points on the Baikal-Amur main line. And we need to pursue a comprehensive approach. We need to integrate the modernization of infrastructure, social sphere, building public spaces, and we also have to link that to economic projects, industrial projects based on well-calculated business models. All cities have got down to develop strategic plans. At the same time, 17 cities and agglomerations are engaged in an active development of a master plan. Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky is one such example. The day before yesterday, we talked about that with colleagues on the ground, and I would like to ask the government to provide their utmost assistance to these projects, to these master plans, to make sure they happen. We need to use such instruments as the Russian Far Eastern concession, infrastructure budget loans, and infrastructure bonds. We also need to set the target caps for the Russian Far East. And these funds should be used to develop cities, make them more comfortable. We need to modernize the infrastructure, in particular the utilities, facilities, and communications. I would like to add that the recent St. Petersburg Economic Forum, I instructed the government to allocate an additional 10 billion rubles on a yearly basis on urban development. And I think it is only going to be right if half of these funds, namely 5 billion rubles on a yearly basis, is funneled into the development of the Russian Far Eastern settlements with a population of up to 250,000 people. And of course, we need to allocate additional resources for the modernization of Far Eastern countries. And I'd like that to happen as soon as possible, and we need to determine the target caps for the next 3 years as part of the federal budget. We also need to boost the construction of housing in the Russian Far East. We need to use cutting-edge, clean, efficient technologies. This year, we've launched the Far Eastern Neighborhoods program. The construction companies will be able to take advantage of advanced development territories. They will have access to tax and infrastructure-related preferences. This will bring down the cost and price of housing. It'll make housing more accessible to our citizens. This mechanism will give us an additional 2.5 million square meters of housing by 2030. And I would like to ask the regional authorities and the Ministry for the Development of the Russian Far East to hold first tenders, choose the construction contractors by the end of the year, and also start designing and building new houses. The Russian Far East citizens also have access to preferential mortgages, and 48,000 families have already bought it with a mortgage of 2% year rate. And this year, we've also expanded this program. Doctors and teachers, regardless of their age, have access to this program. This program is scheduled to run until 2024, but I think since it's in such high demand, it can be extended until 2030. I think this would be the right thing to do. On a particular note, we need to think about young professionals who come to the Russian Far East, or those who graduate from universities here, who find a job here, or are searching for the place of their own to live in. They will have 10,000 flats for rent. The rent rates will be lower than the market average, thanks to the subsidies from the regional and federal authorities. The government has already made the arrangements, and we need to start without delay to build these flats. And of course, it has to be linked to the master plans for the development of the Russian Far Eastern cities. All the requisite infrastructure needs to be there. So this housing should be in demand. It should be comfortable. And I would also like to say that just as other Russian regions, the Russian Far East is running against a shortage of human resources. And we need to accelerate the training of new human resources. Until 2030, the Russian Far Eastern colleges will see the opening of more than 900 workshops. And until 2025, we will launch 29 production and education clusters. And companies will get special compensation if they employ young people. A particular avenue we pursue is high-quality tertiary education in the Russian Far East. We need highly qualified teachers and professors, material and technological base for tertiary education grants, for science and other technological projects. There are network programs between the Russian Far Eastern universities and other leading universities, such as the St. Petersburg State Marine Technical University, the Moscow Aviation Institute, and others. And we will certainly support this avenue. Finally, to train those who will work in arts and culture, in 2025, we will open branches of the Russian University of Theatre Arts, All-Russian State Institute of Cinematography, and the Boris Shukin Theatre Institute, and the Russian Far East. And I'd like to ask the government to provide their assistance. And of course, it's important that the Russian Far Eastern regions come up with initiatives to develop professional careers with the help of the Strategic Initiatives Agency. In Sakhalin, we are launching a pilot project, Let's Make Money Together. Those who participate will get additional training and professional guidance. They will receive assistance in starting their own business and will think about replicating this experience henceforth. And I would also like to say that we need to think about preparing a new generation of top managers. This program is called Muravyovo-Morsky. It combines internships and education programs. This program has already been launched, and I would like to ask the heads of all Russian regions of the Far Eastern Federal District to take active part in it. Distinguished colleagues, I'd like to say once again that the global economy and the global international relations systems is undergoing profound shifts, but I'm confident that cooperation, joining our potentials together, and the principle of mutual benefit. These are the principles we stick to together with our partners, and I am confident that these principles will prevail. Efficient use of our strong suits and competitive edges in the Asia-Pacific, as well as a constructive partnership. All of that will provide us and our nations with enormous new opportunities. We are willing to work together in the name of a successful future, and we're grateful to our partners for participating in our work today in this Eastern Economic Forum. Thank you for your attention.
Владимир Владимирович, большое спасибо.
Thank you very much, President Putin. Am I right, but I seem not to have hear a single word on Ukraine in your speech. Please press the button to turn the microphone on. I'm sorry, is Ukraine part of the Asia-Pacific region? I don't think so. I guess we are here to discuss the aspects of this region. We are based at the region of the Far East. If you're curious to learn more about the situation in Ukraine, I will be ready to answer any of your questions there. Well, certainly this situation is of concern to us. I specifically calculated we are about 7,000 kilometers away from the area of the military conflict, but the impact of what is happening there is very vividly felt here in the Far East as well. And I guess this impact could be split into the economic impact. I guess we get to see that the usual way of life when we had European and Western car manufacturers and the payment systems have all left. And there is a moral aspect to that as well, when the families are being broken and relatives are being separated by the border and stop speaking to one another. So my question is on our country. Since the beginning of this year, and especially since February 24th, what is it that we have lost and we have gained as a country?
Well, I think, I'm confident that we have not lost a thing, nor are we going to lose anything. As far as our achievements are concerned, I think the greatest achievement is a stronger sovereignty for Russia, which is an inevitable outcome of what is currently happening. It's true, we see a certain polarization in the world and inside the country, but I think we will only stand to benefit from that, because everything that we don't need, everything harmful, everything that hinders us from moving forward will be rejected. We will achieve a greater pace of development, because modern development can only be based upon sovereignty. And all our steps in these directions seek to strengthen our sovereignty. And secondly, this is something I'd like to reiterate. It's often said, I see that, and it's absolutely correct. We did not start anything as far as military action goes. We're trying to end the military action, because the military action started in 2014 after a coup d'etat in Ukraine by those who did not want a normal, peaceful development, who wanted to suppress their people. They simply tried to carry out a genocide of people in Donbass. After many attempts to achieve a peaceful resolution of this conflict, Russia has taken a decision to respond in kind, to take mirror actions as our potential adversary was acting, taking military action. This was a conscientious choice. Everything we do seeks to protect the people in the Donbass. This is our duty, and we will carry it to the end. This, in the end, is going to reinforce our country from inside and from the outside. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to give the floor to the Senior General Minh Aung Hlaing, Chairman of State Administration Council, Prime Minister, Commander-in-Chief of Defense Services. The floor is yours, sir.
Your Excellencies, distinguished President Putin, distinguished representatives of the Russian Federation, distinguished guests and colleagues. First and foremost, I'd like to express my joy of being here, and I'd like to express my warmest greetings to His Excellency, President Putin, and the government of the Russian Federation, as well as all the representatives of various countries and businesses here. I have to say it is a great joy and a great pride for me to speak here at the world-renowned Eastern Economic Forum. Dear guests, dear ladies and gentlemen, food security is of paramount importance for the humankind globally. Because we all know that food and water is exactly what we need to operate and to function as human beings. In the course of decades, food security was interpreted as an ability of a particular country to grow and outproduce, to cover its domestic consumption, and to satisfy its own needs. One could say that today the definition of food security is changing. Primarily, it is changing due to what is going on in the world, what is happening to global trade and international food production. We see those changes evolving, and that primarily relates to countries with low levels of food production that are forced to procure food from other markets. And therefore, we see that financial security is not a less of a risk than food security. We also know that the matter of procurement and buying fuels and energy carriers, as well as fertilizers that are vital for agriculture, some countries seem to abuse dollar that is directly related for financial security as a means of weapon. And we see superpowers applying the policy of dollar intimidation against small countries. I believe we could use other currencies in world trade, national currencies like Russian ruble, renminbi, and rupee. We also believe that the system of barter could be a substitution to the dollar system. If we do that, then small countries would be able to overcome financial difficulties. We therefore would like to address our friendly countries with high levels of GDP for support. Food security of some countries could be fully resolved through provision of food and access to relatively cheap, healthy, and reliable food products. Any country could be considered safe in terms of food provision if its residents have unlimited and safe access to food at available and affordable prices. However, there are various factors standing on the way of provision of food security. Those include population growth, increasing demand, and prices fluctuations. We also see that some agricultural products and plants may cease to exist due to climate change. There is water shortage and limited access to arable land. That results in food losses and poor management of food waste. We also see that the population of planet Earth has been growing over the last years. Life expectancy is also expected to grow. It is expected that the population of the Earth will achieve 8 billion people by November 2022. According to the demographic forecast, this number will rise further up to 8.5 billion people by 2030, 9.73 billion by 2050, and 10.4 billion by the year 2100. So we primarily need to take care of food security. We see a growing demand, a growing population, because food is indeed a vital need, unlike close than living. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Myanmar is located in Southeastern Asia, and one could say that that is a geographically important zone. It is a bridge bringing together two oceans. And this is also a region that is a connecting bridge between Indian and Pacific Ocean. One should also mention that ASEAN member countries play a vital role in this region and are responsible for its stability. They provide huge potential for economic development. The residents of ASEAN member countries include 660 million people from 10 different countries. In 2020, this region produced 191 million tons of rice, 45 million tons of corn, 144 million tons of sugarcane, and 79 million tons of cassava starch. ASEAN is an important mediator in the global sector of food security by producing big volumes of food and exporting it to internal and external markets. In 2020, the trade volume of ASEAN member countries amounted to $2.6 trillion, while the internal trade in the ASEAN region amounted to $550 billion only. If we analyze the amount of foreign trade, it is $2 billion. As you can see, the amount of external trade is considerably bigger than internal domestic trade. There is 139 million hectares of arable land in the ASEAN region. 94 million of them are suitable for growing agricultural products. Dear ladies and gentlemen, Myanmar is a country rich in natural resources and a well-developed agricultural sector. There is availability of arable land, forest, rivers, lakes, and sea coasts. In the country, there is more than 13 million hectares arable land that are used to grow key agricultural items, that is rice, beans, and corn. There is also plenty of irrigated lands that are primarily used to cultivate rice, various types of beans, corn, sesame, and cotton. In order to provide for food security and produce enough food for our own population, we would require good development of selection technologies to produce grain, various types of fertilizers, and good methodologies to process and take care of our arable lands. We do believe that agriculture is a priority for development in the Republic of Union of Myanmar. Dear ladies and gentlemen, oil and natural gas is also an important aspect for Myanmar. There is 51 oil blocks onshore and offshore. There are 8 blocks used for gas production that is used in the domestic market and is also exported. There is also a license block in the Bay of Bengal where we discovered 2 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, and just lately we've started development and production of this reserve. We also discovered a gas reserve, and we see that there are good prospects for further developments. We also expect that in the next 3 years, gas production would be the key producing industry in the country, and I'd like to encourage businessmen to come and participate in development of this field. Apart from that, in Myanmar, a lot of unresearched and unexplored sources of copper, iron, and tin. Myanmar is also exporting agricultural products and seafood to Russia and would plan to import fertilizers and energy carriers from Russia. Bilateral cooperation could only benefit from further increase in export-import operation that would bring Russia and Myanmar closer in their cooperation. I'd like to address all the people present at this forum, especially all the businessmen. I'd like to encourage you to invest in various sectors of Myanmar economy, including oil and gas, agriculture, animal breeding, food industry, energy sector, tourism, development of energy carriers, storage sites, and adjacent infrastructure, industrial production of rubber resin, renewable energy, science and technology, IT, communications, healthcare, as well as financial sector. Myanmar is offering a lot of opportunities for various sectors, including foreign trade. Platforms for cooperation like the Eastern Economic Forum, where we are today, definitely contribute to cooperation between the member partners in the Eurasian region. Partnership in the area of trade and investment would contribute to dialogue between the Eastern countries and would create a counterweight to cooperation with the Western impact at the international arena. By strengthening the cooperation between the Asian countries, we develop strong and powerful international north-south transport corridor. Sustainable trade and investment would contribute to geopolitical stability in the Asia-Pacific region, and we firmly believe that setting up reliable relations with major production centers in the region of Asia, including China, India, ASEAN, and BIMSTEC with Russia, would facilitate the development of Asian countries, including Myanmar. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, the Asia-Pacific region is a constantly evolving region, ready and open to investment. ASEAN is playing a vital role in the Asia-Pacific region, and it is necessary to further develop and strengthen diplomatic relations through business negotiations. ASEAN is indeed playing a vital role in the region, and we see a clear rivalry emerging with superpowers, and therefore ASEAN is now playing a vital role in politics, military development and economic sector due to the key trading routes going through the region of Southeastern Asia. I believe it is vital to find one closest and most efficient land route from the ASEAN region to the central part of Russia, and to add one more maritime route going through the region of Southern Asia, Persian Gulf, and Middle Asia. That could be united with the Chinese initiative of One Belt, One Road. Myanmar, being an ASEAN member, is well positioned geographically as a trading hub between the countries of southeastern and southern region of Asia. It is indeed perfectly positioned between Eastern Europe and Eastern Asia. It is vital to find the nearest land route that would lead us to Russia. Additionally, I'd like to assure you all the necessary regulation to facilitate foreign investment has been developed to attract foreign investors. I'd like to assure you that if foreign investors come to Myanmar, they would receive considerable benefits for easy and smooth export operation in various sectors of economy. In conclusion, I once again would like to invite you all to invest in Myanmar. Thank you for your attention.
Большое спасибо, господин премьер-министр. Сейчас вы сядете, наденете ухо.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. If I may, I'd like to ask a question. Would you please put on simultaneous translation device so that you could hear me? So if I may, just a follow-up question on your speech. So just let us wait to make sure you're comfortable. If I may, Your Excellency, I'd like to ask a question on your speech. You've encouraged investment to Myanmar. Right here in this audience, we have many people who are the key stakeholders and key decision makers in terms of development and investment. What kind of guarantees are you ready to provide to Russian businessmen? Why should Russian businesses go to Myanmar? That's my first question. And my second question, if I may. Not all the countries are ready to have relations with the Republic of the Union of Myanmar. How do you manage to exist in this situation? How does your country manage to overcome those difficulties? And do you see any threats in the energy and food security crisis for Myanmar? Thank you.
Now, tattoo the patete lungani mia shibare. Toraga soy in the patete lungani miaza shibare. Dario general, Dayao Yidi Punamesi, Miaza Kanai shibare. That being Tipova, Shikane, Sambu lungani shibare.
As I was saying in my earlier speech, I encourage everyone to invest in Myanmar, and there are a lot of sectors available for investment. And I can assure you that the government of the Republic of the Union of Myanmar is ready to guarantee secure investment. We have a large delegation coming to this forum. We have various union ministers present today, and they are ready to provide guarantees, and they will be very happy to have talks with Russian businessmen. As I said, we have proper regulation in place to accommodate foreign direct investment. It is also stipulated and reflected in our constitution and current legislation. We're willing, the Republic of the Union of Myanmar, to develop, and we're ready to guarantee safety for investment. Thank you very much. At a certain moment in your speech, you were also saying that it is vital to find both on-land and maritime routes from Myanmar to Russia. You were saying that Myanmar is very interested in Russian fertilizers. But if I may, I'd like to ask you about the grain deal that was made this summer. So it turns out that an agreement was reached. We've made some concessions, and now it turns out that we are not allowed to export grain. And secondly, there is not much of grain going to Africa. There were only 2 vessels carrying grain going to Africa. And our permanent representative at the UN stated that probably Russia would question the rationale of going on with a grain deal, and the deal expires at the end of November then. By the deal, you mean the grain deal? Yes, the grain deal that was achieved. Yes, well, formally, our fertilizers are exempted from sanctions just like food imports, but in reality we do face limitations, and that is a very tricky situation when on the one hand we see that there are no limitations or no direct sanctions against Russian food imports, but there are major difficulties with logistics, shipping issues, insurance, finance mechanism. There are many limitations. Many of them are still in place, although I have to recognize the efforts being paid by the UN Secretary General and the United Nations Organization as a whole, because we see that a lot of limitations are being removed in terms of cargo transportation and freight transportation. We see that the seaports we've been using for transportation by us are sanctioned, but are now being exempted, and we see that the vessels are allowed to use those seaports. So the situation is changing for the better, although some limitations and difficulties remain, and they are certainly interfering with the process in terms of ensuring and protecting food security and the interest of all the consumers on the global food market. And this is something that is still pushing further the food prices. That's the first point. And we do believe that this work to eliminate remaining limitations would be continued. And secondly, I'm sure you remember, and you watched me meeting our friends from African countries and various African organizations. And as I mentioned in my keynote speech, we promised we would do everything in order to protect the interest of developing countries in terms of food supplies to their respective markets, including Ukrainian grain. And everyone was talking exactly about this aspect when we were talking about that. And as we were saying, this is once again a way to deceive us, to cheat us. And that is being done not just against us, but the interest of the global community is being harmed, the interest of our African partners and other countries who are in badly need of food supplies. That is absolutely unacceptable. That is cheating on your partners and simply cheating on their interest, and that is unacceptable today. I talked to one of the European leaders about a month ago, and I was saying that out of 21 vessels, only 2 were actually sent to the developing countries. But already now there are 80 vessels that we're talking about, and still the number of food supplies delivered to developing countries is not growing. I don't know how to even name it. Well, they used to be empires having colonies there, and they still treat those countries as colonies, and they're only thinking about their own interest. And they don't even care about the interests of the developing countries by using them as a cover-up. In truth, they are only guided by their own interests. I do hope that the situation would change at a certain point, and we would very much insist on our side that the whole enterprise and attempt to provide for grain transportation and food supplies is focused on providing positive impact on global food markets so that the prices are going down. It seemed to be slightly stabilizing right now, but there is still an upwards trend. And according to the international organizations, the prices are determined to grow further. The food prices are to grow further. Therefore, we need to unify our efforts to break this trend. And we have all the chances to do that. We simply need to make sure that we are not acting under some pretense, but are really focusing to implement those decisions. And just a follow-up question, if I may. What do you mean that they cheated on us? I'm sure that some kind of documents were signed. It's not just NATO promising not to expand further east. Well, if we are to talk about documents and papers, unfortunately, there is no specific comments regarding the volume of food supplies to be transported to the developing countries. It's just that all of it was done under the pretense to protect the interest of the poorest countries, to make sure that there is no hunger. And all this pressure that was applied on us from the side of our cozy partners and our geopolitical foes was exactly focused on a call for Russia to protect the interests of the poorest economies and to prevent hunger and famine breaking out in those countries. And we've done everything possible to make sure that we comply with those arrangements. We do comply with them. We are playing our part, but it turns out, just yet again, it's a fraud, really, not just against us, but against the poorest countries. Again, under the pretense of protecting their interest. That is so obvious. Just look at the reports. 80 vessels and only 2 went to the poorest countries. The rest of them went to the European countries. Well, how come? Nonetheless, we're determined to continue this work, hoping that the goal that were initially defined when we started those arrangements will finally be achieved. All right, we'll be waiting for November to see Mr. Prime Minister of Armenia. The floor is yours. Nikol, Pashinyan.
Thank you very much. Distinguished Vladimir Vladimirovich, dear friends, allow me to express my gratitude, first of all, to Mr. Putin for his invitation to participate in the 7th Eastern Economic Forum that has proven to be an efficient and effective platform to exchange views and ideas on a wide range of issues. But I should say that this year, the most popular statement would be as follows: we are living in difficult times. But if we look into this a bit deeper, we'll face a question: have times ever been easy? And to be frank, the history of mankind, as such, is a chain of difficult times. So the humanity invaded another formula, that any crisis situations bring with them new threats and open up new opportunities. Right now, the main task for the government and for the countries is to properly manage the threats and to notice and make proper use of the opportunities. In this context, I should say that the times are indeed difficult for our region too. It's because we are facing an escalation of the challenges that have existed for a long time already. First and foremost, I'm talking about the security challenges. What does it have to do with the current situation? When the attention of the whole international community, and most particularly that of the strategic partner of Armenia, of the Russian Federation, is very much focused on the developments around Ukraine. And there are very specific threats that this may result into a destabilization of the situation in our region. By the way, the situation hasn't been particularly stable, and you know that in 2020 we experienced a war, and the situation was similar in a way that when Azerbaijan launched this war, the attention of the entire international community, including the Russian Federation, was focused on problems related to the COVID-19 pandemic. But we hope that in close cooperation with the Russian Federation and with our partners, we'll be able to manage the situation, to respond to it, and keep the regional situation under control, which is particularly important for the global security. But let me say this. We have good news too. Right now, the Armenian economy has a very good dynamic. This year, we are going to witness an economic growth of at least 7%. And in this context, I would like to stress the Eurasian Economic Union for our country has proven to be efficient in this situation too. Because the economic growth that we are going to have in Armenia has to do with the liberties provided by the Eurasian Economic Union. I'm talking about the free movement of goods and services, capital and labor force. And we are seeing this though something remains to be done. And we should continue our work to maintain this positive dynamic so that after such a high economic growth rate, we don't face a new economic crisis. I believe that since we've already touched upon the issue of regional development, I should explain how what Armenia has to deal with the Russian Far East. It's common knowledge that in this situation, logistical schemes and routes are changing dramatically. If we look at the map, we can clearly see the opportunities opened up, opportunities that have already opened up for Armenia too. Despite everything, the overflow of goods from the west to the east and from the east to the west will never stop. And from the north, to the south, and to the north from the south, the flow of goods and services will continue. We can see that Armenia is at the crossroads of the intersection of these routes. And we do believe that it offers us an opportunity that we should try to seize. In our country, we are now implementing a project that is entitled North-South. It implies the construction of a new motor highway that will connect our southern border to Iran and our northern borders to Georgia. But besides that, there is a new opportunity. You would know that on the 9th of November 2020, thanks to the personal involvement of Vladimir Putin, trilateral declaration was signed between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the Russian Federation on the ceasefire in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. And Article 9 of this declaration refers to the opening and deblocking of all economic and transport infrastructures in the region. After that, on the 11th of January 2021, again in Moscow, at that time in Moscow, personally, together with the President of the Russian Federation and the President of Azerbaijan, we signed a trilateral declaration on the establishment of a trilateral working group led by Vice Presidents of the Russian Federation, the Republic of Armenia, and Azerbaijan, in charge of opening up communications in our region between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The idea of this project, this draft document, is that Armenia is to have transport routes through Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan will have transportation routes going through Armenia. But globally speaking, it means a possibility to open new international transport routes. And I should stress that we found it very interesting, and we hope that sooner rather than later, with due support of Russia, this issue will be resolved and this task will be achieved. Not everything has been accomplished yet, but we've made good headway in the work of the Trilateral Commission. But a lot remains to be done. We should resolve some legal issues. We should see what legal regulations will guide the work of these transportation rules. But it's clear that the new routes will be under the full sovereignty of those countries through the territory of which they are running. And we hope that based on this principle, will be able to implement this project. We refer to this project as Armenian Crossroads, and I find this name quite logical. We hope that through Armenia, there will be roads linking south to the north and east to the west. We believe this project is very important, not only for the countries of the region, for Armenia, Iran, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, but also for the Russian Federation, for Far Eastern countries, and for Eastern countries as such, and also for the African region and for the Middle East too. Indeed, it is a global project, and we hope it will be implemented successfully. As you would know, we have already initiated talks with Turkey. We hope that with due support of Russia, we'll be able to establish cooperation with Turkey. Active discussions are ongoing with Azerbaijan regarding the settlement of the Nagorno-Karabakh problem. And in this context, too, we are hopeful that we'll see support from the Russian Federation, not only as a strategic ally of the Republic of Armenia. The Russian Federation is a very close partner for Azerbaijan too, and this gives us additional opportunities. But I would like also to highlight the role of the Russian Federation as a co-chair of the Minsk group of the OSCE that is dealing with the settlement of the Nagorno-Karabakh issue. The main concern, I'll reiterate and stress it once again, in terms of security in our region. I think there are some forces believing that Russia, that is a key security factor in our region, or at least this is a perception in the Republic of Armenia, and this is proven by the relationship and the agreements and treaties that are enforced between the Russian Federation and Armenia. So the problem is that some forces, some parties believe that Russia is too much occupied with Ukraine, with the Ukrainian issue, and this may be used as a situation to destabilize, as a good time and opportunity to destabilize the situation. It might seem funny. There is a situation, we are in a situation when some actors invest too much efforts into representing Armenia in Moscow as a country with pro-Western government, and to present it in the West as a strongly pro-Russian country with a pro-Russian government, and thus to use it as a factor to destabilize the situation in our region. Now, I'm pleased to see that we are in a very close dialogue on this issue with our partners, and we try to clarify our positions on all matters of international agenda. And naturally, our relations with Russia have always been and should remain the relations of strategic allies. We hope that this will be a key factor to ensure stability and peace in our region. I would like to sum up by expressing a somewhat unusual thought. I can't say that I'm convinced, but it's my impression that all countries and all governments of the world, all without exception, wish peace and stability, without any exception. The sole problem is that everyone has its own vision of peace and stability. Why are all conflicts happening? What's the goal of these wars and conflicts? Well, the ultimate purpose is peace. Everyone's fighting for peace. Everyone wishes peace and stability. So that's the main problem. Everyone has its own perception of war and stability. So it's our goal and our task. Unfortunately, one that can't be achieved. So our goal is to approximate our positions. For global actors, it might be a bit more difficult. So we should approximate and try to harmonize our visions about the norms on which the peace and stability should base and build on. In recent years, this term of multipolar world order is very popular, has become very popular, and it is something about which we are almost close to a consensus. But the thing is that everyone understands the multipolarity in its own way, so we should try to somehow harmonize our positions and the perceptions of this. The perceptions of the participants of a potential multipolar world order. Thank you for your attention. That's all I wanted to say today. Thank you.
Пока Никол занимает свое место.
While Mr. Pashinyan is going to his place, let me say that Armenia is a country that knows firsthand what energy crisis is. In the 90s, you've experienced it as a country, and that's clear. But right now, you are going through a very rapid, remarkable intensification of your relations with Russia. You came here to this forum. Don't you fear that you will be subjected to any secondary sanctions? Well, I think it's not quite an effective position to be frightened. As I've already mentioned, managing the emerging threats and not only noticing the opportunities, but working on opening up new opportunities is something we should do. I've already mentioned it today. Definitely, we are too very much concerned about the food security, energy security. And I've already mentioned this. Of course, the inflation rate in our country is high too, and it has direct impact on the social situation and economic situation in our country. But on the whole, the situation is manageable. There is a problem, but we are not in a crisis situation. But at the same time, let me stress that it's, in particular, thanks to the support of the Russian Federation. Especially in the first half of the year, everyone has many concerns and threats, and not only within the Eurasian Economic Union, but also in the bilateral format. We had very intensive contacts, and we raised many issues, and I should say that I'm impressed by the swift response of Vladimir Vladimirovich and Mikhail Vladimirovich, Mr. Mishustin and Mr. Putin, the way how they responded to the issues raised by the Armenian side. This partnership is very important. I'm not sure that all citizens of Armenia know about these details, although we keep speaking about this. But it's indeed very important. We have just mentioned the transportation of grain in various directions. Thanks to the decisions adopted by the President of the Russian Federation and the government of the Russian Federation, we succeeded in making these issues manageable. For us alone, it would be very difficult. It would have been very difficult to cope with this. So it is a situation where we don't see a threat of any sanctions. Mr. Putin, a follow-up question to you. Mr. Pashinyan and everybody wishes peace, but everyone has his own perception of multipolar world order and of peace. That's exactly the topic of our forum. What is our perception of multipolar world order? We mentioned this on many occasions, and I can reiterate it here. Our perception of the multipolar world order and of the world is that the world should be just and not based on dictate of just one country that considers itself as God's messenger and bases its whole policy on its alleged superiority and exceptionalism. We should treat one another as equal partners regardless of the territory of the country, the GDP rate, or the modern weapons deployed by the army. One should be based on international law and not on some rules that someone invents for himself. That's our notion of justice, and that's the essence of stability of the world order that has always been our assumption, our key assumption, and we'll continue to fight for our sovereignty. And no one should have any doubts that we are ready to cooperate under the circumstances with any state that wishes so, and will do it. And I'm confident that that's how it will play out. It will get back on track. Let me clarify something. You say everyone is free and to choose its own way, and everyone is equal. So why can we peacefully resolve the questions? Well, because international law is always being undermined. Now, many say that Russia violates international law. I believe it's not true. Who started the war in Iraq without any sanctions of the UN Security Council? Who destroyed Yugoslavia under noble purposes? Who did this? Who unleashed war in the center of Europe by bombing Belgrade? No one referred to international law back then. Let me refer to a very simple chain of events related to international order. The UN Charter enshrines the right for self-determination, and the International Court of Justice took the decision that ruled that if some part of a country wants to declare its independence, it doesn't have to ask the permission of the central government of its country. That was the ruling about Kosovo. And why cannot we apply the same principle to Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics? If they have this right, and they do have it in accordance with the UN Charter and the principle of freedom of self-determination, they have made use of this right and they declared the independence. Do they have this right in line with international law? Yes, they do. And this right is based on the ruling of the International Court of Justice. Does another country have the right to recognize them? Yes, that's what we did. Once we have recognized them, can we sign a treaty on mutual assistance and friendship? Yes, that's what we did. This treaty was ratified by the Parliament of the Russian Federation and their respective parliaments. And the Russian Federation has two particular obligations, in particular to provide assistance in case of aggression. In this case, it's aggression on the part of the Kiev regime that is illegitimate because it goes back to coup d'etat as a prime source of power in today's Ukraine. Is it in line with the UN Charter? Yes, there is Article 51 in the UN Charter referring to the right for self-protection, and as a party to this treaty, in accordance with this article of the UN Charter, we have to provide assistance to our allies. That's what we are doing. That's an easy chain of logical steps that is in full compliance with international law. That's it. And as for Iraq, was it a similar situation? No, they just bombed the country. Same was with Libya. Who thought back then about international law? No, those who do this understand that it's not in line with international law, therefore they refer to some rules. Where do they take these rules? Let them follow these rules. Thank you very much.
Now we'll move over to the Far East issues again, and I'm passing the floor to Prime Minister of Mongolia, Luvsannamsrain Oyun-Erdene. The floor is yours. First of all, I would like to welcome Your Excellency, President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, for an invitation to take part in this forum. I would like to greet all the delegations participating in this forum and all the participants. This forum is taking place in quite difficult conditions of the post-pandemic world and quite difficult international relations. But at the same time, this opens up new opportunities for our future cooperation, and I hope you will agree with that. In order to overcome these circumstances, we all need to get together, and in such a way, through these united efforts, we'll be able to overcome all the difficulties. Today, I would like to speak not about difficulties, but about more positive things that could be made together. At this forum, I would like to let you know about major projects of regional importance that will be implemented in Mongolia under the long-term program of development, which is called Vision 2050. And the first stage of this project is called the New Recovery Policy. The population of Mongolia is 3.3 million people, and we are on the 99th position. It is the index of human development, and the gross domestic product is 13.8 billion US dollars, and GDP and the GDP per capita, it is 4.6, and we have lots of issues that should be resolved through united efforts. In 2020, Mongolia adopted a long-term program called Vision 2050. The major goal is expanding the economy. It should be tenfold increase, and also development of the social and economic, ensuring economic growth and a better quality of life for the people of Mongolia. For this, during the post-pandemic period, we began the first stage of this program implementation. It's called the New Recovery Policy. There are 6 major areas, and there will be over 50 projects. These are border points, energy, balanced development of towns and rural areas, increasing effectiveness of state administration. This policy of new recovery will ensure the threefold increase of export and 2.5 increase of other economic parameters, and also the threefold increase of the throughput and capacity of cross-border points. Implementation of this program is aligned with Russia and China programs of development and other countries of this region. It is extremely important for investors to take part in it, as well as major companies of our region. We don't have much time. I'm going to give an overview of the border points and ports which are relevant for economic development. For us, border points are of great importance as we don't have access to water. You see here that we have 42 land border points and 6 air ports. We have 29 cross-border points with Russia and 13 with China, and we always follow the standards of our neighboring countries, and we hope to bring our cross-border points to the international level. The threefold increase of the throughput capacity of the border points will provide conditions for making Mongolia a transit country for this region. At the Eastern Economic Forum, we were discussing the project of the vertical rail project. Yesterday, we exchanged opinions on this project with the heads of the Russian rail company. In such a way, this project will connect Russia, Mongolia, and China. Mongolia is committed to work with international investors for modernization of border points, and also in all the projects aiming at air traffic and cargo projects development. In addition, there are projects in the area of energy. We are ready to take part in major energy projects in the region. And this will provide not only for the inner requirements, but we are also ready to export energy. As for green energy, we are going to begin construction of a hydropower plant in Oyun-Erdene, and the construction will begin next year. And we are discussing the Nikol hydropower plant with Russia. And also we are discussing other existing energy facilities in Mongolia with Russia. Here in this map, you can see the sites for new construction and the existing energy facilities. We are open to a dialogue with investor companies, and part of our delegation is a Minister of Energy and other officials who could discuss all these projects with the Russian side. The third goal of the new recovery policy is a recovery of the industrial sector. 92% is the mining industry, and 31% is export of copper concentrate, 30% is coal export, 11% is gold and iron ore. Since January 2022, we began works for construction of underground Yutalgoy coal mine, and it is one among top 5 in terms of the discovered resources. And here in this map, you see information about various projects, including the manufacturing. At the same time, today we had negotiations with Gazprom. It is on a gas pipeline from Mongolia to Russia, and all the works of this project are following the schedule that was previously agreed on by our parties. Today, in just several days, we are going to meet the representative of the Council of the People's Congress, and we are going to discuss this in Mongolia. In order to implement all the reforms, we are working on improvement of the investment situation, and we are going to reach a new level of export and international trade. Today, we are open for investors and major companies to begin active cooperation with Mongolia in order to implement all the projects that we have identified. We have e-Mongolia, a state services portal, and you can find all information there, and we'll be happy to see you as guests of our country. This forum is taking place in difficult times, but of course we know that crisis times are not very pleasant, but at the same time they open up new opportunities. Again, I would like to stress our commitment to work together with Russian partners in our region, and we believe that all the difficulties will be over, and after this post-pandemic period, we'll be taking part in the integration processes of our region, and I'm absolutely sure that very soon we'll see the times when we'll be able to work successfully on all the infrastructure projects. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to ask you a question on this. You mentioned Sila Sibiri, the power of Siberia gas pipeline from Russia to China. Why do you think that it should go via Mongolia? Has a decision been taken already? Because I heard that China was against it, or at least there was some misunderstanding. Yeah, this is a very big regional project. We have developed the feasibility study, and today we were discussing it in detail with Gazprom leadership, and very soon we are going to bring these documents for consideration of the parliaments of our countries. And during the Beijing Olympic Games, I met the chairman and the head of the government of the People's Republic of China. And we support this project. We are for its successful implementation, and we're absolutely sure that it will be completed. Referring to your question, why this gas pipeline should go via Mongolia, because this is, first of all, an integration project, and we, these three countries, we should get together. And it's not just pipeline project. There's also a rail line and a road, an automobile road, and there's air traffic as well. All this should unite our countries, and this will ensure our stable economic growth, and this region will become more competitive all over the world. That is why we are working with our neighboring countries, and all the calculations should be done by 2029. So all these works will have been finished by now. Right. I know that you are all aware about certain restrictions on cap prices for gas that are going to be introduced by G7 and the European Union. And what if the whole Western region will be cut off for us? So will it be possible to work with that? We are, first of all, thinking about development of our country, and this concerns all mineral resources and all primary energy carriers. And, you know, we have so much of these resources, so we will be able to meet the demands of everyone who is interested in this. And this is very beneficial for our partners, and this can be very beneficial for our European partners as well, because our gas is many times more competitive than any LNG brought from overseas. The gas brought from Russia for decades was used in the leading economies of Europe, and definitely they used this competitive edge on the basis of that. And if they believe they don't need this competitive advantage, it is all right. We are not concerned by that. Okay, but there's a great demand in energy resources, and not only in China. We know that everybody in the world is aware of this. Okay, the Chinese economy is growing, and the demands are growing as well. And there are many countries like that all over the world. Definitely, the European market has been always a primary importance market, but the situation is changing rapidly. And at the beginning of this crisis around Ukraine, you know, this has stopped being of primary importance. And even the United States partners, they shifted their tankers with LNG to the eastern countries. You know, the Americans are very pragmatic. Okay, they've been fighting with one of our projects on LNG. It is in the Arctic. We are not going to point to certain leaders of this, but the first LNG tanker from this field went to the United States because it was profitable. You know, when I heard about it, I couldn't believe them. I said, why? Because it was profitable. So they are really very pragmatic, and we can learn a lot from them. As for our resources, you know, the demand is so high at international markets, so we won't have any problem with implementation and selling. And this is one of the largest economies in terms of the consumer prices parity, and the demands are growing. Okay, we have stable agreements, and relations are at unprecedented high level. The power of the Siberia pipeline is functioning. We are studying other routes, and one of the possible ways is via the Primorsky Krai, via Mongolia. Of course, these decisions cannot be taken straight away, and it's not because somebody doesn't want it, but it is all because of the economic conditions and geological conditions. As far as I know, now the energy operators, they agreed that, yes, one of the routes may pass via Mongolia. And Mongolia is a friendly country in terms of political affairs, and we can ask Mr. Miller. I'm sure that major parameters of this deal have been agreed upon. We even agreed with our Chinese partners on some price indication, and this is always very important. We know that the Chinese partners might be difficult negotiators because they follow the interests of their country, first of all, but at the same time, they've been a stable partner. The market is enormous, and we are not going to deal with LNG. I gave you an example of the first Arctica SPD. It is this LNG project. The first tanker has been delivered already. Everybody buys it. And if European countries would like to reject this, and if they don't need these competitive advantages, that is fine. What about restrictions on gas prices? Well, this is another silly thing. This has nothing to do with market relations, and this decision will have no future. All administrative restrictions in the sphere of world trade, they will lead only to disproportions and higher prices. What is happening now at European markets? This is the result of the European specialists and the European Commission work. We have been always insisting on forming the prices on the basis of long-term contracts, and this should be linked to a market category of oil and oil products prices. And they are usually determined by the market, and gas prices, they are linked to this in a long-term perspective. Why is that? Because the production of oil and gas requires a lot of investments, and those who do invest, they need to be sure that these produced resources will be sold. That is why we're interested in long-term contracts. And they were saying, no, it is not exactly in line with the market trends. We need to follow this spot prices market. I kept saying no, it is not so, because gas market is something different, and those both buyers and sellers, they need to be absolutely sure in the stability of relationships. And they were saying no. At that time, the prices were very high, $100 per ton, 1,000 ton. And what about now? It was 300 later. Now it is what, 3,000 already. We kept saying no, don't do it. But they forced their companies to do it, and now we had to use these spot prices. And now it is an element of all the prices. It is not our requirement. This was imposed on us by the Europeans. So these are really nonsense decisions. And now, when they faced what is happening, they are trying to restrict the prices in some way, and this is nonsense. So this will lead to rising prices at international markets, including European ones. So nothing can be done through administrative decisions. What about Nord Stream 2? Was it built in vain? No, nothing is done in vain. We developed those technologies, and if you're interested whether we can switch on the and have this Nord Stream 2 connected, yeah, we'll be ready to do that. No, I was just asking about the construction of this pipeline. Nord Stream is practically closed now, and everybody keeps saying, well, Russia is using energy weapons. Well, this is, again, something silly, and this is nonsense. We supply whatever is required by our partners, so they place an order and we deliver. So we are not, pumping it into the air. So there are orders, and then we deliver. What happened? Okay, there are two lines of this pipeline in Ukraine, and one of them was switched off. It was disconnected by Ukraine, and there was a excuse that they couldn't control it. And so this is number one. They did it themselves. And the second, it is Yamal Europe going via Poland. Poland sanctioned this pipeline, and again, they switched it off. Who did it? The Poles did it. And okay, so it was done in Ukraine and in Poland. And now Nord Stream 1. Okay, these German partners, okay, and all the maintenance and repair works of gas turbines is regulated by the British law. I didn't know about it, and Alexei Miller explained it to me. The contract for maintenance of these gas turbines, Gazprom had to sign it not with the central Siemens company, but with their branch in Britain, and now they are under sanctions. And as for repair works of these turbines, they agreed to do it at the Siemens plant in Canada. What about us? What do we have to do with it? Okay, Canada took it and then returned it to Germany. And under the contract with Britain, it was written that they should have been sent to Russia. Okay, now the situation is different, and the contract should be modified. But this British branch of Siemens, okay, they don't answer at all. Okay, so okay, there can be as many photographs as possible near that gas turbine, but we need to understand what are property relations, who owns this turbine, and so on. And the last turbine is now out of order, and representatives of Siemens, okay, they visited, and there's oil leakage there, some lubricants leakage, and it cannot work properly. Okay, so fix it, okay, give it to us, and then we'll switch it on tomorrow. So they're saying we're using it as a weapon. No, what weapon? So they cornered themselves into this sanctions blind alley. And you see what is happening, okay, in Berlin, okay, there are people protesting, switch on this Nord Stream 2. We share the sentiments of the Germans, but it is not us who introduced sanctions against Nord Stream 2. We did it under pressure from the Americans. And why do Americans try to do it? Because they want to sell LNG themselves.
Well, we know what the previous administration used to say. Yes, we sell at higher prices, but let them buy it because we protect them. Okay, let them do that. About the UK, a follow-up question. There is new Prime Minister Liz Truss. Before that, that was Boris Johnson. What are your expectations from the new Prime Minister? As far as I understand, there are not many hopes that the relations are going to improve. Well, you know, the UK has a procedure for the election of the head of the government, which is far from democratic procedure, because it's based on who won the previous elections, which party in particular, and the people of the UK do not participate in these changes that are happening in the government. We know the position of Tories on this question, and in particular with regard to Russia, and it's up to them to decide how to build relations with Russia, and it's up to us to protect our own interests, and we are going to do that consistently. Let no one doubt that. Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Li Zhanshu. Our Chinese partners are very tough negotiators, but a reliable partner nonetheless. President Putin, ladies, gentlemen, friends, I've just carefully listened to the addresses delivered by all the heads of state and government, in particular to the address by President Putin. Your address has been very interesting. Your statement outlines the overall vision of the current state of affairs in the world politics, as well as your position on international issues. You've also presented your vision of how the Russian Far East should develop. You have also painted the picture of a prosperous Far East in future. We are also interested in that same vision, and we are willing to work further. We're interested in further reinforcing our cooperation with Russia across the whole spectrum. because the Eastern Economic Forum is Russia's brand. Over the recent years, thanks to the personal attention and personal promotion by President Putin, the forum has established itself as a prominent platform for economic cooperation in Asia. It is also an important platform for mutual understanding and fostering cooperation. In 2018-2021, President Xi Jinping, at the invitation of President Putin, attended the Eastern Economic Forum twice. In his important statements, he outlined his own vision of Chinese-Russian relations, the promotion of bilateral mutually beneficial cooperation, and the maintenance of peace and security in the region, which received a positive response from the international community. Under the leadership of President Putin, Russia's economy was not undermined by tough sanctions imposed by the US and its satellites. In a very short time span, the Russian economy consolidated, showing great level of resistance. And we see growth in such fields as mining, food processing, timber processing, chemical industry, metal production. Energy consumption is also recovering after a hard blow that was dealt to the economy. The volume of railway cargo throughput is also stable. As the ruble is becoming stronger, inflationary pressure and inflationary expectations are going down, imports are recovering, the civil consumption, employment, and companies are all stable. And the economic situation is far better than anticipated. China believes that Russia is an important partner in international cooperation, and investment cooperation in particular. Will continue to develop cooperation in trade, finance, technology, science, education, and culture. China is willing to continue to support the development of the Russian Far East and take part in this process. We will also continue to provide our assistance to Russian friends, in particular in the holding of the Eastern Economic Forum. The motto of this forum is "On the Pathway to a Multipolar World," and it's very much relevant as the saying in China goes, "He who does not move forward is moving backwards." And the world is developing in contradictions. And we need to follow the logic of historical processes. You have to keep abreast of times. A multipolar world is an irreversible trend, as it suits the strivings of the world community. The world is currently undergoing a profound transformation, entering into a new era of tumultuous changes and transformations. Some countries are willing to build up barriers, create narrow blocks, fuel confrontation. Protectionism is seen a recrudescence as well as unilateral action. Political globalization is facing difficulties. These tough challenges demonstrate unequivocally to everyone that a multipolar world and true multilateralism are the sole correct path forward for humanity. Starting from last year, China is working on the initiative of President Xi Jinping on global development and global security. And this initiative has garnered widespread support from international organizations, in particular the UN, and a great number of countries, in particular Russia. These initiatives are bringing more order and positive energy to this chaotic world. And they also represent China's path, China's wisdom in overcoming global problems. China is willing to work with international partners to take decisive steps to foster fruitful cooperation under the previously mentioned two initiatives for the sake of all nations and peoples. Ladies, gentlemen, friends, in February this year, President Xi Jinping and President Putin secured important agreements on a wide range of issues related to the expansion of our comprehensive practical cooperation, and in particular in implementing the Global Governance Initiative based on the principle of joint work, cooperation, joint use, under the strategic leadership of two leaders. The strategic cooperation and comprehensive partnership between China and Russia demonstrate a very positive, vibrant trend. They are also highly resilient and have internal incentives for development. China is Russia's important partner in the Far East. Our cooperation in this region is moving forth thanks to personal attention and care shown by the two leaders. We are fully implementing the Russian-Chinese program of cooperation for 2018-2024 in the Far East. We also have the Intergovernmental Commission, in particular the Russian Far East and the north east of China. It helps integrate deeper these two regions to help them recover and develop. This all gives us some very good, fruitful cooperation. I personally spent many years working in the Chinese province of Lujiang, and I know about mutually beneficial cooperation between the Chinese northeast and the Russian Far East. This is a long-standing productive cooperation, and I know personally these projects that I used to promote in the past when I worked there. I feel that this geographic proximity, as well as the solid foundation of friendship between these regions, all of that is a basis for beneficial cooperation. And it's also thanks to their rich natural resources and wonderful environment. As the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of China, I continue to pay very close attention to the cooperation between China and Russia in the Far East. Over the recent years, the Far East has seen a significant improvement in infrastructure. Openness is improving as well. The business environment is getting better as well. The Far East is also occupying an increasingly important niche in the economic cooperation between the two countries. Russia has also adopted a strategy for the development of the Northern Sea Route. Just as President Putin has just outlined, the funding for this program is very big, 1.8 trillion rubles, and 13 additional ports along the Northern Sea Route are going to be constructed as per the plan. This will raise the throughput capacity, and it'll also attract more Chinese companies who are interested in working together with Russia in transporting goods across the Northern Sea Route. And of course, China wants to continue to be the biggest investor, the biggest economic partner for the Russian Far East. Over the recent years, the overall trade between the Russian Far East and China was almost to the tune of $14 billion, 28% more than the previous period. And the first half of this year, as far as the territory of advanced development in the Russian Far East goes, and the Vladivostok free port, well, there are 24 joint projects, $14.7 billion to the tune of this number. We see development in agriculture, e-commerce, logistics, transport, and also there are projects regarding the Northern Sea Route. Thanks to the personal attention of President Xi Jinping and President Putin, we saw the inauguration of the automobile bridge here, Blagoveshchensk, and very soon we will commission a new railroad on the border. And I've recently been to the province of Hlaing, and I saw those projects personally. I inspected them, and I think these two projects will help us improve the throughput capacity of these border checkpoints. The two sides are also active at building cloud platforms for interregional cooperation and cultural and humanitarian exchanges. For 13 years in a row, we are holding the Russian-Chinese market of art and culture festival, which helps bring our nations closer together. And we are fully satisfied with these outcomes. Ladies, gentlemen, friends, as of now, Northeast Asia is one of the most vibrant regions across the world. Improving cooperation in the Far East provides us with a good opportunity to secure security and prosperity in this region. And in that regard, I would like to come up with the following proposals. First, to implement a global security initiative in the interests of peace and stability in the region. 4 years ago, President Xi Jinping spoke at this very tribune, saying that harmonious, based on confidence, mutual confidence, environment in Asia is in the interest of the world community as a whole. We need to build a harmonious, peaceful region as a common home. And to achieve that, we need to band our efforts together. And we need to stick to a concept of comprehensive, stable security. We need to abandon the zero-sum game pattern and the mentality of the Cold War. It's important to improve dialogue, partnership, solidarity, instead of sowing discord and confrontation. We need to stick to the concept of indivisible security. We need to secure our own security with due respect for the security of others and security of all. This is going to be our positive contribution to the maintenance of peace and stability across the region. Secondly, we propose implementing the initiative on the global integration of the region and the global openness of the region. Northeast Asia can boast rich natural resources and also a well-developed, diverse infrastructure. The countries of the region are very unique, but also complementary, and they are destined to play an important role in reviving the world economy. In that regard, we need to stimulate better partnership in development. We need to accelerate joint work on resources. We need to integrate and harmonize our development policies, tapping into the potential of our economies. We also need to act against unilateral sanctions, maximum pressure. We need to bring down trade barriers and also secure unimpeded and safe value chains. We need to implement joint projects and build a more sustainable and free environment for investment and trade, which is going to provide an additional new impetus to political globalization. Third, we need to harmonize national development strategies in the interest of fostering deeper cooperation in the Far East. China does everything to comprehensively achieve the important agreement between President Xi Jinping and President Putin. We need to integrate One Belt, One Road initiative and the Eurasian Economic Union. We need to add substance to this cooperation. We propose working together on big projects in energy and transport, and thereby we will create new poles of growth in green economy cooperation. We also need to expand our financial cooperation and promote payments and transactions in national currencies. We need to facilitate trade procedures and secure better practical results. We will work together with our Russian partners to make efficient use of the existing mechanisms and platforms to create a better environment for business activities and to create this cooperation in the Far East. And to that end, legislative authorities of our respective countries have to work together to provide the necessary legislative support. Ladies, gentlemen, friends, China resolutely supports and promotes multipolarity across the world. And henceforth, we are willing to join our efforts together with those of other countries to fend for the principles and purposes of the UN Charter to promote the world order principles based on rationality and justice. As you know, in a month, China is going to host the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of China, which is going to usher in a new era of building a modernized socialist state. The Chinese people working under the leadership of the Communist Party is steadily moving towards the modernization of the country with Chinese specifics. It is also making its contribution to modernizing humanity as a whole. Presently, China's economy is still highly stable and it boasts a great potential. It shows a long-term development dynamics. We will steadily promote high-quality development and expand openness, including at the highest level. We will work together with Russia and other partners across the world, promoting our cooperation under the One Belt, One Road initiatives, opening up new horizons for cooperation in Northeast Asia in the name of building a single destiny community for all mankind. Thank you for your attention.
Большое спасибо. Пока Ли
Thank you.
Зhanshu занимает свое место.
While Mr. Li Zhanshu takes his place, President Putin, it's been said that we are expanding checkpoints, opening railroads, but we have a bottleneck. In September last year, we did not modernize the Baikal-Amur main line and Trans-Siberian. And after that, Mr. Trutnev says that the economy is going to lose 1.5 trillion rubles due to the bottlenecks in these routes. Can we afford that? And when will the situation change? Well, it's not what we have lost. It's what we're not going to receive due to these bottlenecks, as they're called. Yes, we should have done it timely. Moreover, the decisions were there when I had gone to Kuspas. I remember that very well. But then, another point of view prevailed, according to which it was difficult to expect the requisite volume of coal carriage, in particular eastwards. But as we can see, this view was erroneous, but there's nothing catastrophic about that. We are expanding the cargo carriage volumes. They are flowing in greater numbers eastwards, and they will continue to grow. And we have plans to explore the eastern railroads, in particular the eastern part of the Trans-Siberian main line and the Baikal-Amur main line. And there's going to be better management, but also the throughput capacity is going to be raised. And in the nearest future, we plan to increase the throughput capacity by around 40 million tons. And I'm confident that we will manage to do that. Thank you. Mr. Li Zhanshu, a question to you. What's your assessment of the development of the Russian-Chinese relations? How can China help in developing the Russian Far East? I believe that under the strategic leadership of President Xi Jinping and President Putin, the Chinese-Russian relations stood the tests that they went through, and they're stable, they are dynamic. Our relations are based on non-confrontation, non-alignment, and they're not aimed at any other country, nor are they subject to the short-term fluctuations of the world affairs situation. They're independent, they are self-sufficient, and I think that reinforcing this cooperation in the end stands to benefit both our nations and also the world community at large. And I think that we have a great potential to develop the Far East. As I have just pointed out, I know the Russian Far East very well, and I know that we have plans for development and that this opens enormous opportunities to our two countries. As far as the avenues for cooperation go, well, they're numerous. Transport infrastructure, for one. As President Putin has just said, the Russian Far East will see the modernization of the railway network and the airports. Infrastructure is also going to be modernized, and the sea infrastructure is also going to be modernized, just as the automobile roads will be. I think that China has already expressed its interest in cooperating in the field of infrastructure. As for agriculture, China has a very solid foundation in this field, just as Russia does. Russia can boast very rich natural resources in agriculture, so we can develop cooperation in soya beans. Several years ago, I worked at the Lujiang province, and we loved to procure Russian commodities. And I think through fostering better ties with Russian partners, it's possible to invest in joint ventures so that in the Russian territory we could set up new projects for processing these commodities. This will help bring in more taxes, tax revenues for the Russian Far East. This will also help with China's agriculture. There is also energy cooperation. All the guests have spoken about the general state of affairs in the energy sector. Russia has very rich natural resources, energy resources in particular, and I can tell you that our cooperation in this field is very stable and still has great potential. There was some talk about the pipeline, and we view that in the positive light. The same goes for science, education, environment. These avenues are also very promising. President Putin has also spoken about the fact that Russia is going to allocate more funds for improving the living standards in the Russian Far East, and China stands ready to make a contribution of its own to that cause. The modernization of hospitals, construction of hospitals and education facilities, the modernization of cities, that's very good, a very promising avenue. Moreover, there is a very good environment in the Russian Far East, and we also have very good environment in China's northeast. And I think in environment and the field of green energy and decreasing carbon emissions, we can work together as well. We can also work on improving the state of our environment, and there's much we can work on together and much we can talk about. To cite an example, we can think about decreasing carbon emissions. We can also work in protecting the environment. I know that President Putin cares a lot about the conservation of leopards and tigers. And as the needs of economic development go, that's good because it helps create better environment, better living standards. You need to conserve the animal habitats and animals. We have a very solid foundation. We have a very good basis. And all of that promises us enormous prospects. Once again, in the end, I would like to say thanks to President Putin and other friends, not just tigers and leopards. Our president also cares about birds. We would like to say that Mr. Zhanshu was the head of a province and its capital is Harbin, and many Russians used to live there right now. We would like to move on to the video. Just the first one is that of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India.
Rashtrapati Putin.
I am glad to have the opportunity to connect with you virtually at the 7th Eastern Economic Forum. Your Excellency President Putin, distinguished guests, namaskar. I'm really happy to welcome you at the Eastern Economic Forum being organized in Vladivostok. This month marks 30 years since the establishment of the Indian consulate in Vladivostok. The first country to open a consulate in this city was India. And since then, the city has witnessed many milestones in our relationship. Dear friends, established in 2015, this forum has today become a major global platform for international cooperation in the development of the Russian Far East. For this, I compliment President Putin's far-sightedness, and I also congratulate him. In 2019, I had an opportunity to participate in this forum in person. At that time, we had announced the Act Far East policy of India. And as a result, India's cooperation with the Russian Far East has increased in various fields. Today, the policy has become a major pillar of this special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia. Friends, whether we talk about the international North-South corridor, the Chennai-Vladivostok maritime corridor, or the Northern Sea route, connectivity will play an important role in the development of our relations in future. India is keen to strengthen its partnership with Russia on Arctic issues. There is also immense scope for cooperation in the energy sector. Along with energy, India has also made significant investments in the Russian Far East in the areas of pharmaceuticals and diamonds. Russia can become an important partner for the Indian steel industry through the supply of coking coal. We can also have good cooperation in the mobility of talent. Indian talent has contributed to the development of many resource-rich regions of the world. I am sure that the talent and professionalism of Indians can bring about rapid development in the Russian Far East. Friends, There is an ancient Indian principle of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It has taught us to see the world as one family. In today's globalized world, events in one part of the world make an impact on the whole world. The Ukraine conflict and the COVID pandemic have had a major impact on global supply chains. Food, grain, fertilizer, and fuel shortages are of great concern to developing countries. From the very beginning of the Ukraine conflict, we have emphasized the need to adopt the path of diplomacy and dialogue. We support all peaceful efforts to end this conflict. In this regard, we welcome the recent agreement on the safe export of grains and fertilizers. I once again would like to thank President Putin for giving me the opportunity to address this forum. And I convey my best wishes to all the participants of this forum. Thank you very much.
हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। बहुत-बहुत धन्यवाद।
Ну а мы теперь переносимся в Малайзию. Свое видеообращение прислав.
Now we are moving over to the address of Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Tuan Yang Terutama Presiden Persekutuan Rusia, Ketua-Ketua Negara, Tuan-Tuan Yang Terutama, serta hadirin yang dihormati sekalian.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, heads of the states, and other participants of this forum. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to express my utmost gratitude to His Excellency Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, and the organizers for inviting me to deliver the keynote address at the plenary session of the 7th edition of the Eastern Economic Forum this year. As you are all aware, this forum aims to support the economic development of the Far East region and the opportunity to expand international cooperation in the Asia-Pacific region. I would like to express my admiration and respect for President Putin and the government of the Russian Federation for the consistent effort in developing the Far East region, which is rich in natural resources such as minerals, oil, and gas. We can see that there's great potential which can be explored in this region, and I hope Malaysia can be part of the partnership to achieve the vision of rapid, balanced, and inclusive development in this Far East region and Vladivostok. The world is facing various challenges, from economic instability, public health risk, and geopolitical conflict to climate change. These threats have posed unexpected impact onto the world, which is why the international community need to pay attention to non-traditional security issues, especially food security. On this note, a comprehensive perspective on various types of universal security threats needs to be considered so that a comprehensive solution can be formulated and achieved together. Global political and economic stability is essential for the world to continue moving forward. Nevertheless, the perception of inequality in terms of political power, economic power, and the level of development that varies greatly between countries and regions need to be recognized and dealt with prudently, especially by the great powers, which are the global leading political and economic players. Therefore, any solution sought should not only benefit one party, but should also involve all parties. Countries that still believe in hegemony will only create discord, tension, and instability in political and social aspects. Meanwhile, unilateral sanctions imposed by the world's great powers have resulted in the supply chain's instability in continuing operations in the manufacturing sector. Distinguished guests, the world today is moving towards multipolarity, which brings threats and opportunities that should be leveraged by all parties. All countries should be able to accept and adapt to the new distribution of power in shaping a more prosperous, sustainable, and equitable future. From Malaysia's perspective, no country should live in isolation. Therefore, Malaysia always practices a friendly attitude and is open to establishing friendships with any country. For us, every nation should take a bold step towards creating a peaceful, multipolar world, respecting international diplomacy and creating universal friendly relations. From the economic point of view of this multipolar world, some developing countries have emerged as new economic powers. Others are moving toward becoming additional growth catalysts, and some are trying to reach their potential in this new system. By 2040, Asian countries are expected to represent half of the global gross domestic product and 40% of global consumption, most of which come from Southeast Asian countries. Almost 60% of trade in Asia is among Asian countries themselves. This clearly proves that Asia is able to influence the trend of world trade through the inter-regional approach. Besides that, implementation of economic cooperation initiatives such as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, and the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, have created a free trade area covering a large part of the global economy. At regional level, Malaysia firmly adheres to the principle of ASEAN centrality, as well as basic principles such as mutual cooperation, respecting national sovereignty, and a spirit of helping member countries in achieving regional peace and prosperity. As one of the founders of the ASEAN member countries, Malaysia will continue to play an essential role in strengthening the ASEAN community and inter-regional integration. Therefore, Malaysia hopes that all ASEAN dialogue partner countries should pay attention to and respect this principle. As a developing country, Malaysia welcomes the platform that BRICS member countries, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have created in providing space and opportunities for developing countries to underscore and highlight their positions as well as views on the latest situation or developments regarding the global development agenda through the high-level dialogue on global development during the 14th BRICS conference in Beijing in June recently. Finally, I would like to emphasize that Malaysia remains committed in moving forward with all the countries across the globe in finding the best method to deal with current challenges more meaningfully. Thank you very much for your attention.
А я сейчас попрошу поставить обращение премьер-министра Вьетнама.
And now we are going to see the address of the Prime Minister of Vietnam.
Thưa ngài Tổng thống Vladimirovich Putin.
Your Excellency, President of Russia Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to address the 7th Eastern Economic Forum. On behalf of the government of Vietnam, I would like to send my best regards and wishes to President Putin and all distinguished delegates. This forum on the pathway to multipolar world this year is taking place at the time when the global economy and global trade are facing a great deal of challenges, particularly the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. This requires us to adopt a global approach and further international cooperation to maintain stability and growth in the region and the world, and to ensure the welfare of the people, because people are at the center. They are actors and drivers and resource and purpose of all development processes. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, Vietnam consistently pursues the foreign policy of independence and self-reliance, multilateral position and diversification of international relations. We seek to be a good friend, reliable partner, and responsible member in the international community for peace, cooperation, and development in the region and the world. It is also our policy to develop an independent and self-reliant economy which engages activity and extensively in international integration. Together with the effective control of the COVID-19 pandemic, Vietnam is enjoying macroeconomic stability, whereby inflation is under control, economic growth is maintained at a high level, major economic balances are secured, political stability and public order and safety are upheld. At the same time, Vietnam diplomatic activities have been strengthened and widened. Cooperation in investment and tourism has been strongly promoted. With the economy ranking the 5th among 35 Asian economies in terms of openness, Vietnam has signed 16 free trade agreements with more than 60 countries and territories, including most of the major global markets. Vietnam is also an active participant in many multilateral initiatives, including regional and interregional economic associations, thus making responsible contributions to sustainable development in the Asia-Pacific region. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, Vietnam always attaches great importance to the comprehensive strategic partnership with the Russian Federation. We highly value the outcome of economic cooperation between our two countries over the past years, especially in the fields of energy, industry, and others. We are looking forward to further advancing collaboration in areas and sectors where each side enjoys a competitive edge and make the best use of the opportunities arising from the free trade agreement between Vietnam and the Eurasian Economic Union. We stand ready to work in close partnership with the EAEU countries to review and upgrade the free trade agreement to bring it to the new development context. Within multilateral frameworks, Vietnam commands the important role in engagements of the Russian Federation in the Asia-Pacific. We support Russia's policy to link up and promote economic cooperation between Russia, including its potential Far East, and the countries in the Pacific Ocean. Key areas for such cooperation include securing the supply chains of materials and energy to serve production and business activities, ensuring food security, and maritime transport connectivity. We welcome the strengthening of the ASEAN-Russia strategic partnership and Russia's contribution at ASEAN-led and regional cooperation mechanisms, including Asian Regional Forum, EAS, APEC, and ASEM, just to name a few. Vietnam is ready to serve as a bridge to advance the ASEAN-Russia strategic partnership. It is our desire to step this cooperation in every area. This includes all areas of economy and tourism, and also to advocate the formulation of a free trade agreement between the ASEAN Union and between the ASEAN countries and the EAEU. I wish the 7th Economic Forum great success. Good health, happiness, and success be with Mr. President.
Сейчас я попрошу вывести на экран, на мониторы.
Thank you very much. And now let's have a look at our poll. The results. This is RBC News Agencies, and we did it recently. And have a look at the results. The questions were, is the economy going to recover soon? Then the second one, okay, so is the economy going to decline, or you're not sure? And have a look. The totally different opinion among the regular readers and the members of the industrial union. Have a look. 62% of the readers said that it will be like that. My question is, so have we hit the bottom already, or so is there going to be a bouncing back, or so we are going to get deeper? It is always the question of prices.
И на гражданах отражается негативно, разумеется, на их доходах, на их уровне жизни, и на экономике тоже отражается негативно.
Well, definitely it has an impact on the economy, because it is a break in the macroeconomic stability. That's what I was trying to say in my statement. We in the government and in the president's office, our experts, believe that we have already passed the peak point, the most difficult situation. Macroeconomic figures testify to this. First, the inflation rate is decreasing. Right now, the year-to-year inflation will be at the rate of 12%, and it will go down to 5 to 6% to reach the target of 4%. I hope we'll see it in the fourth quarter. The unemployment rate is at a minimum. It is a very important factor of the economy. It's 3.9% in our country. In all developed countries, this figure is much higher. We saw stabilization of state finance. Let me stress in particular that the budget will see a deficit in this year, $500 billion of rubles, despite all gloomy predictions. It was expected that there will be a sharp decrease in the GDP. It's not going to happen. There will be a decrease, but it's not going to be so big. It's about 2.2%. So I believe we can state that thanks to effective, active and verified measures, the government succeeded in preventing such a negative scenario. And the consolidated budget of the regions will look very good, with a deficit of 1.5 trillion rubles. So we are implementing all of our programs of development, all of them. More than that, this year, the federal budget expenditures will be 20% more than last year. It shows that we support all areas that we have identified as priorities, and this will be reflected at the situation of Russian economy as such and on the whole. I very much believe that based on these fundamental factors, we will assess further trends as regards the prices. In any case, we are going to do our utmost to make sure that we reach our targets, and we are going to reduce the inflation. One of the particularities of the Russian Far East region is very interesting. Namely, there are almost no federal shop network shops. For example, to go to a Perekrzhostok shop, one has to go to other federal district. Only recently, the owner of the chain shops mentioned they were going to open 100 new supermarkets. Why is it happening? First of all, the prices are higher here. It is a matter of fact. It's obvious. Secondly, the density of population is an important factor. Over 12 million people live in the Urals, and in Moscow alone we have the same population. So there are economic considerations and pragmatic economic considerations behind this. Then you mentioned that chain shops are entering the region, and there are specific own chains here, and we count on their development, and we hope it will impact the situation in a positive manner. Speaking of the Russian Far East, can we judge in the categories of whether something's profitable or not? Well, from the point of view of our activities and the logic behind our activities, we should be guided by the strategic considerations of the development. We should prevent a decrease of population, and support measures are needed. If you wish, I can list them further later. But the business responds to something different, to the development of the economic life, namely. For example, you asked me about gas and our relations with the consumers in Europe. For example, Poland has closed the Yamal-Europe pipeline for political reasons. But not only. Poland purchased gas at high prices. Then in Germany, they closed the pipeline, but immediately they started buying our gas via reverse supply from Germany. Germans received the cheapest gas, and they started selling the same Russian gas at a bit higher price to Poland. And that's it. That's the underlying reason. Companies are guided by their pragmatic reasons, but with this, they affected negatively their domestic consumers. Immediately, the prices grew, and they lost everything, every profit. And that's something we see everywhere. Economy can't work differently. One can't damage the objective economic laws because one will see the impacts immediately. You also asked about the caps on our energy resources. It's a stupid decision. If someone tries to implement, follow up on this decision, and it's not going to bring about anything good. There are contractual obligations, supply contracts. Are they going to take any political decisions violating the contractual obligations? We're not going to implement them. Then we'll seize our supplies if it violates our interests, in this case, economic interests. We're not going to supply neither gas or oil or coal. We are going to implement our contractual obligations in full measure, but if someone tries to impose something on us, let me say this. Those who impose something are not in a position today to dictate their own will. They should come to their senses. But it's something that applies to the economy as such. It is also true for domestic economy. Getting back to whom you've mentioned, we are not going to supply anything that goes beyond our contractual obligations. We are not going to let them impose anything on us. Let them freeze. By the way, they are considering several decisions, and we see what's happening. Either they wish to subsidize the high prices, and it's bad, because it's not going to change the consumer behavior. They will consume exactly the same volumes as before. Or one can reduce the consumption. From the economical point of view, it's correct, but from the social point of view, it's a dangerous situation. It can be explosive situation. It's better to stick to contractual obligations, to the negotiated rules and civilized norms, but we too should act in a civilized manner. We should provide preferences, but at the same time we should act in a careful and predictable manner, step by step, without any fluctuations. We should gradually move towards our goals. That's how we intend to continue. Let me ask another question about business and state relationship. You mentioned previously that in crisis times the role of the state is always growing. Let me give you an example. 2008. You said you would send a doctor to the Oyun of Mitchell. 2020, you gave an interview and you were asked whether you consider businessmen as swindlers. And you answered the very reasons behind that statement. Recently, I had a conversation with Mr. Belousov, and he said that metallurgic industry has cheated on us. How do you develop your relationship with the business right now? Well, you shouldn't focus on particular statements and see them out of the context. If I'm talking about specific concrete representatives of the business community, it is something that is about those particular representatives, and it shouldn't be applied to the business community as such. And the business community demonstrates a high level of responsibility before the citizens of Russia and before the Russian state. I would like to stress this and express my gratitude to them. That's my first point. By the way, you know, I used to tell them in the past that they will have problems protecting their interests. Something was their assets were seized, but it's something I warned them about. They should have invested not in foreign projects, but in the development of Russian infrastructure. They would have benefits right now. It would be a lesson for them. Who could have imagined? I warned them. I spoke about this. But it's not because I'm so smart, but because I have more information. I have warned them. I had warned them. But many of those sitting in this hall in particular did realize it, and they didn't have many assets abroad, and they turned out to be right. As for the entrepreneurs, I said this. You mentioned Mr. Belousov and his statements and that someone deceived someone. Well, in the course of discussion, you can say many things, but it yet again testifies to the fact that what I said right now was correct. There are specific rules, objective rules in the economy. You can't neglect them. Why did we have high prices in the field of metallurgy? It's because the market conditions were so. And being responsible before their workers trying to achieve maximum profits, they were following these interests. But the state should have responded to this before by applying specific instruments to restrict or limit exports or get excess profits back into the budget. These are market instruments. You all know them. Either via customs duties, or we could return the excess profits in some other ways. But entrepreneurs active in this field should know what the state can or is willing to do in a particular situation. It's a very delicate matter of cooperation within the domestic economy. There is no problem with that. It's a matter of regulations, and we are going to continue with them in a very careful manner. As for the conditions, have we put in place conditions to make sure they stay here and not go abroad? I know there are now conditions for the entrepreneurs, and many of them now register their offices here on the Ruski Island. Are they afraid, or have you created specific conditions? Well, there are some objective factors. You are absolutely right. the responsibility lies with the state. As for tourism, yesterday you had a state council, the Presidium of the State Council on Tourism. Would you please clarify your position regarding visas? We have many visa facilitation agreements with Latin American countries, and as for Europe, we don't have such agreements, visa-free agreements with none of European countries. But many European tourists could come here. Maybe we don't need a visa curtain, but should attract tourists. Yes, that's right. Just as in the field of energy, we won't let anyone impose any decisions on us. In the same field, too, we can go the same way, but we shouldn't do anything that violates our interest. Probably Mr. Lavrov would be angry with me. Yes, he's here in this hall. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs believes that normally we should act in a reciprocal manner. If they have taken the decision not to issue visas to us, whether we should do the same, I believe not. We are interested in seeing young people come here. We are interested in seeing business come to our country despite any restrictions. There are many businessmen who love Russia, trust Russia, and are ready to work here, so welcome. Please come here and do work. Why should we restrict them? There are trainers, professors coming here and teaching our kids. Why restrict them? Athletes, cultural figures, why should we restrict them in any way? We're not going to cut off the contacts on our own. Those who do this isolate not us, but themselves. And yesterday, at the same Presidium of the State Council, there was a dispute regarding the Federal Agency for Tourism. Some people said that the mandate of this agency could be enhanced. Others who didn't agree. What decision did you take? Well, it's quite easy. It was a pragmatic decision. Obviously, internal tourism is something very important, And external tourism is important too. We have a big country. Our friends and colleagues mentioned this today. Our friends from the People's Republic of China, our colleagues from Myanmar and Mongolia, and not to mention the closest countries, the former Soviet republics, including Armenia. They all know of the vast tourist potential of the Russian Federation. But naturally, a lot remains to be done in order to develop the infrastructure for domestic tourism. I'm not going to list all these instruments, but we are going to develop them. And yesterday's debate was very simple. Who should receive the 10 billion rubles that have been allocated for the tourism development, whether it is Ministry of Construction or the agents responsible for tourism. It doesn't concern me. The Ministry of Construction is professionally in charge of infrastructure and construction development, and the Russian Federal Agency for Tourism only employs 100 of people. It's not something that matters. The Ministry only constructs, but the Russian Federal Agency for Tourism sets out the vector for the development of their domain, so I think it would be only logical to allocate this money to the Federal Tourist Agency, but it's up to the government to take the decision. I think the decision will be taken soon. It's not so difficult. Mr. Pashinyan, let me ask you this question. Recently, Europe was faced with an inflow of labor migrants. Many Russians came to Armenia, and those who oppose the developments in Ukraine. What role does it play in the economy?
Никол, насчет отвечать, хочу сказать, еще больше армян приехало в Россию.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pashinyan. I'd like to say, before you begin to respond, that even more Armenians have come to Russia, more than 1 billion people. Well, nothing new about that, about Armenians coming to Russia. It's always a pleasure. I have to tell you that I do not quite agree with your assessment, and that many people have come because they need to get their salaries, even though they stay in Russia, they work abroad, and there are problems with financial transactions, with wires, and due to that, they had to relocate to Armenia. And I think when I made my address, I painted our point of view. I do hope that what's happening is being perceived in Russia as simply relocation within the framework of the Eurasian Economic Union. And it's precisely the goal for which the Eurasian Economic Union was established. It was meant for the free movement of services, goods, labor, capital, and this is what we see happening in reality. And President Putin has said that too. He warned against future potential problems which could arise for business people who work in the West. But I think this is precisely why the Eurasian Economic Union exists. It's designed to make the economies of our countries more flexible. And it's obvious now already, but for the sake of justice, I have to tell you that in January, February, we already were expecting a very high rate of economic growth. In March, however, we ran into problems and there were concerns. But the flows that came into Armenia turned out to be of huge help. And we're in constant contact with our Russian counterparts. There are some ties, some connections which we can explore, which we can work together on. There is a very good dynamic. Many Russian regions are interested in working with their counterparts in Armenia. You've asked about potential sanctions. I would like to draw your attention to the following fact. Well, theoretically, if Armenia were to come under sanctions, this is not going to be beneficial to Russia. So what we propose is to work smart and explore the opportunities together, the ones that I've just arisen. We have to spot early on potential difficulties that concern not only Armenia, but also the Eurasian Economic Union. We need to spot those difficulties in time to neutralize them, to eliminate them. And the Russian citizens who've come to Armenia are most welcome. Moreover, during the first half of the year, this was something we discussed, and I drew the attention of my Russian counterparts to the following fact. If these Russian citizens relocate to Armenia, they still remain within the framework of the Eurasian Economic Union. And the chances that they will go back to Russia from Armenia are several times higher than if they were to move to the US or to France. There are many people who are leaving. Well, even in the past, many people went on vacation to Armenia. Right now, it's vice versa. They live in Armenia and go back to Russia to get some rest, to meet their relatives. Well, in the past, you used to come to Yerevan and everything was so cheap. Right now, the prices have risen. Well, it's another matter. And moreover, we have a very big problem with the property, with real estate, because real estate prices in Armenia are climbing up and the rent flats rates are rising as well. This creates problems on the one hand, but on the other hand, it creates new opportunities. And I think it's a 13% increase in construction in Armenia. And I think the Russian business is also interested in investing into this field. And incidentally, I would like to say that within the context of potential economic problems, it's very important that, despite the fact that we are in close cooperation with Russia, international rating agencies still confirm very good rankings for Armenia. And I would also like to remind Russian business circles that Armenia is moving high very rapidly among the countries with a free economy, and we even have bigger ambitions. We do hope that we will rank among the top 10 on a world scale in this rating. And there are some very good opportunities in that. And we can work closely economically together with Russia, and we can propel this cooperation to a very high level. Over the last 30 years, Russia has always been the first trade and economic partner for Armenia. But presently, it's a new chance that we see in front of us. We can give a new quality to this economic cooperation. Let's take this opportunity and ask President Putin how we view those migrants who go from Russia to Armenia. Well, we welcome everything that stands to benefit the Russian business. And if the circumstances are such that it's more useful, more beneficial for people to work somewhere else, these are IT specialists first and foremost, well, let them do that. And I agree with Prime Minister Pashinyan. Armenia is no stranger to us. You can work in Yerevan and you can, basically live in Moscow, come back, and nothing stands in this way. Many people have come back. They see that nothing bad is happening here. Well, even despite the sanctions, aggression from certain countries against Russia, everything keeps functioning, everything keeps working. But if someone likes it and Armenia likes to work in Armenia, well, let them do that. And if anyone wants to live in Baku, let them do that. The same goes for Kazakhstan, because Kazakhstan has created a very good financial area for these purposes. Everything in the Eurasian Economic Union, well, it's easier for us to regulate and it's easier for people to work in this space. I would also like to ask about those who live in the Russian Far East and also along the borders of other seas of our country. I think by the end of the year, a new draft law should be submitted to you on the quotas on crab catch, and business on the ground is concerned that small and medium-sized enterprises are not going to be able to, implement the norms of this law. Yesterday, we spoke in great detail with the governor on this matter. There is a problem here, and let me tell you what it is. This quota, 20% of the overall quota that is being allocated for the catching of marine bioresources, and it has to be funneled into shipbuilding or fish processing plants on the ground. This is a forced measure because our fishing fleet is becoming obsolescent. And this norm is working. Around 100 contracts have already been concluded to build ships or to build fish processing plants. Many of these contracts have already been implemented, and many ships have been built and commissioned, and the same goes for the fish processing facilities. But even though it's working, there is a problem. Some small enterprises have committed themselves to this process, and unfortunately, due to the sanctions that have been imposed, they cannot implement these obligations on time due to the disruptions in value chains and because their foreign partners have failed to fulfill their obligations, and the government has to take that into account. I've heard a lot of talk here in particular with regard to the international agenda, about the international energy security and new structures for energy security. Recently, the IAEA has published a report on the developments at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. This report does not say who is firing at it, but it only states the damage that has been done to the nuclear power plant. Can you comment on that? Do you trust this report? Yes, I trust it, certainly. The IAEA is a responsible international organization, and its head is a true professional. Of course, the IAEA is under the pressure of the countries in which they are active, the US in particular, and the European countries, and they cannot say outright that the fire comes from the Ukrainian territory, but it's obvious. We are in control of this nuclear power plant. Our military are there. So are we the ones who are firing it ourselves? It's, pure nonsense. Sheer absurdity. But yes, some agree that it goes against common sense. Moreover, there are, some remains of HIMARS and other missiles from Western technologies. And I saw that this report says that the IAEA deems it's important to withdraw military equipment from the nuclear power plant, but there is no military equipment on at the site. And the IAEA professionals should have seen that, and they can see that still because there are two experts. The military are simply protecting the perimeter and also the territory. Well, there are a couple machines. Well, but that's the Russian Guard that is responsible for the safety and security. You can go there and see that for yourselves. We can bring a big group of journalists there, European, American journalists, and you can come and see for yourselves, and you can see the remains of the missiles against Energodar. They come from the other side of the water reservoir. We know that the Russian military equipment, in particular the military equipment that is responsible for the counter-battery fire, is not stationed at the nuclear power plant. It's very far from it. But the Ukrainian side creates threats to nuclear security and safety. Why are they doing that? I do not quite understand. Maybe they're trying to create more attention to their current situation, to crisis on many occasions. And, they were trying to carry out, perpetrate terrorist acts on the Russian territory, blowing up energy transmission lines close to our plants and energy facilities. Why are they doing that? What's the point in creating a threat to Europe as a whole? But they are doing that. Yesterday, I asked the head of Rosatom to present me a report. I want Rosatom to come up with several additional proposals as to how to ensure the security, because the biggest threat is not to the reactor, but to the storage of spent nuclear fuel. Well, meanwhile, head of the European diplomacy, Josep Borrell, I'm going to read it out. It's a translation. Today, we are meeting as negotiations with the Ukrainian representatives. So far, we do not have a concrete plan to how to win over the fascist regime in Russia. What is that? Well, how does this concern the nuclear power plant? Well, there's no relation to that, but this is the characteristic. Well, he's just saying things. He knows how to say things. We've seen many appeals. We've heard him say an appeal to win over Russia in the battlefield. If he were a defense minister of some country, then it would have been understandable. But coming from the head of the European diplomacy, well, it sounds bizarre. Well, I'm not one to judge. Let him say what he wants. As far as the fascist regime goes, I can tell you the following. If he had lived during the 1930s. He is Spanish, I think. If he had lived in Spain in the 1930s and he had heard a weather forecast, the sacramental phrase, the skies are clear over all of Spain, as is known, it was a signal from General Franco to start a coup d'etat, then he would have taken up arms. But who would he have joined? The democratically elected government of the country of the putschists? I think he would have joined the putschists, because today he supports the very same putschists in Ukraine. The primary source of authority in Ukraine goes back to the coup d'etat that transpired in 2014. So he is the one to side with the fascists. Secondly, just as the rest of Europe, he is actively supporting the Ukrainian authorities. I've had many discussions with my European partners on these matters, and we always demonstrate the neo-Nazi trace and the current Kiev authorities. They say, well, there are neo-Nazis everywhere, and in Russia too. Yes, but neither in Russia nor in other civilized countries are these Nazis and extreme nationalists of Nazi sentiment being elevated to the pedestal of national heroes. And this is precisely what Ukraine is doing. And if this sir, whom you have mentioned, may God give him many years, if he knew who Shukhevich and Bandera were, who killed Jews and Poles, you know, this dirty work was given to them by the Nazi occupants. They were the ones to destroy the people. Well, if he knew that, then he would understand where true Nazism is thriving and where it's being supported at the national level. We should give him a chance to look the truth, the reality in the eyes, and if he has a grain of conscience, then he should make the right conclusions. Well, those events in Ukraine, the massacre at Hlaing, it was a tragedy for many families. Right now, we are facing tragedies as well. In early March, I stopped speaking to a friend of mine who lives in Kiev. Well, he stopped speaking to me. Dmitry Peskov says that all friends of his wife stopped talking to her. How do we overcome this tragedy? How do we, rank-and-file citizens, should go about building bridges with rank-and-file Ukrainians? You know, for many years, the authority, the power ended up in the hands of nationalists and Nazis, and they are carrying out total terror across the country. Many people are afraid to speak the truth about what's really happening there. Well, we are critical of certain citizens of ours who have a very particular view of our actions to protect the Donbass. But what about people who are being shot at the streets, who are being killed simply because they think differently? They're physically exterminated there. There is a difference. Do we understand what is really happening there? We need to do that. We need to understand. I can assure you that a great number of people in Ukraine hate this regime. And we should rely on these people who understand what is truly happening and who are willing to fight this. But they cannot do that because they are under the yoke of this Nazi regime. But once again, I can tell you that there are many people like that, and we have to support ties with them, and we will do that. I am confident that the future of Russian-Ukrainian relations, well, it's going to be up to these people. But we have to explain to them what values we are bringing there. We have to explain that, what we bring
Well, they will explain it to you. Just go to the Donbass and ask Ukrainians who live there, what kind of values do they defend there? They defend their motherland, they defend their identity, they defend their history and their people. Well, as a journalist, I can't help but ask a somewhat corporate question, if I may. On the 5th of September, there was a sentence announced to Ivan Sapronov, 22 years for state treason. That is the highest possible punishment for this type of crime. Also, a license revoked from Novaya Gazeta, whose editor-in-chief is a Nobel Prize laureate, and around 30 mass media ceased to exist in Russia lately. Many journalists relocated over to Latvia and other countries abroad and keep writing and working from there, from Latvia. Do you think that type of increased pressure on mass media is justified? Don't you think that that could be considered a demonstration of a multipolar or maybe unipolar world that we've been talking about today? Well, you made reference to the Nobel Prize laureate. We are delighted that a Russian citizen received a Peace Nobel Prize award. But I would say the Nobel Prize Committee somehow depreciated the actual value of Nobel Peace Prizes. Just please understand, I have a very good attitude to all colleagues of mine, despite some disagreements with US partners. We had very business-like relations with President Obama, but why would he become a Nobel Prize laureate? I never commented on that, but let me ask it now. What is it that he's done so that he received a Nobel Peace Prize? Please consider all the military actions that were taking place in various parts of the globe when he was a president. Now, a Russian citizen received a Nobel Peace Prize. We know many examples when decisions are being made solely under the impact of the current political situation, and it does not give credit to those making those decisions. But nonetheless, we can be proud and happy for those citizens of ours who received this award. Now, let's talk about those journalists from work from other countries. Well, I can assure you that they are happy that they're allowed to relocate. Even while being here in Russia and working here in Russia, they always worked against us. And now they pretend that they've been threatened, and they're happy to relocate with the very same salary that they used to receive here in Russia. It's just that the situation of today forces them to choose their stance, to choose their side, and they are doing it. Well, it is their decision to relocate, and they are working there in the anti-Russian think tanks or centers. And our goal is to explain it to the majority of the Russian citizens what is the actual position of Russia and the leadership of Russia. We need to explain our actions aimed at protection of the interests of the Russian people and the multinational people of Russia in general. We are acting solely based on their interest protection, and we see that the overwhelming majority of Russian citizens support us. What about the 22-year prison sentence? Well, as for this sentence to a journalist, well, this journalist received this punishment. I do not know the details, but I only know that he was not just a journalist, he was also advisor to the head of Roscosmos, Russian space agency. And he was making his money not just through journalism activity, but he's also collecting certain information and shared it with an intelligence service of a certain country. Our domestic intelligence watched him carefully for a few years, and they listened to all the internal communications that he was having with those paying money for the secret information that he was handing over to them. Then an investigation was properly conducted, and they seized not just the assets he had, but also the devices that he used for communication. The court has considered it to be well proven and made a court decision. Whether that is a fair decision in terms of the sentence that was awarded as punishment, well, I'm not in a position to judge. We probably have the Prosecutor General here in the room. If he believes that that is excessive punishment, then the prosecutor could always appeal this punishment, and certainly the lawyers of the defendant and the convicted person in this case are always allowed to appeal this decision. If I may, the final question on my side, and then we will wrap up. So, coming to the topic of the Far East, this is definitely the topic that I'd like to wrap up with. You've been asked a similar question last year. What is your attitude towards the Far East? Now the situation has changed. Have you somehow revised your attitude and your position regarding the Far East and the people living here? What is your attitude to them now? No, nothing changed here. On the contrary, and our Chinese friend mentioned it in his speech. He said that the Far East is of great interest for Russia and for its neighbors in the Asian space. And we're delighted that our positions coincide on that, and that was also mentioned by our distinguished colleague from the Republic of the Union of Myanmar, the Armenian Prime Minister, the Mongolian Prime Minister, all mentioned it. But the key thing for us is that the Far East, just like the Arctic, is the region of the future. Those are the regions determining the future of Russia, and it's not just about the resources, it is also about access to the global region that is developing rapidly. We started active recovery of the economy of the Far East, development of this region, not because we were preparing some kind of military operation in Donbass. The development of the Far East has started long before, and that is our strategic bet based on the trend of development of the global economy and emergence of the new power banks, new centers of power in the world. And since we have friendly relations and very high level of strategic partnership with China, with our neighbors here in the region, we see the region boosting really, and the growth is really lavish. So we need to do our best to facilitate our contacts with the region and with our neighbors in this region. We made this decision a long time ago, and we're very happy that this decision was made. We're also happy with the outcomes. So far, they're probably modest, but they are there. And most importantly, we cannot afford to have reduction of population here in the Far East. On the contrary, we need to make it attractive for residents. And for the first time in the newest history, we witness migration inflow at the Far East for the first time in 2021. And actually, the natural churn of population is happening, but it is still lower than on average in the country. And that is the key demonstration and manifestation of what we do and the things we do in the right direction. A lot remains to be done, but nonetheless, we'll continue moving in this direction. Thank you very much, President Putin. I would like to express my gratitude to all the distinguished guests. And the closing remark goes to you, Mr. President. Well, to be frank, I was not preparing any closing remarks. I would like to express my gratitude to the audience for their attention, and of course I would like to express my gratitude to our friends who have been able to come and join us despite their busy agendas in their respective countries. Thank you very much for being able to share your time with us, to pay your visit to Russia, and I have no doubt and I know that we are to have bilateral meetings later with some of the colleagues. I've met some of them already and meet some later today. We will discuss the outcomes of our bilateral relations and discuss steps for the future. And I'm convinced that it will contribute to facilitation of our bilateral cooperation and cooperation in this strategically important region for Russia, the region of Far East. Thank you very much. Hereby we close our session.